Welcome to the American Valor World War II channel. Subscribe to our channel because every day we publish stories about the valor of American soldiers based on real events. Support us. Like our videos if you like what we do for you. June 6, 1944, 0530. English Channel. The sea churns violently beneath the landing craft. Inside LCA 911, Lieutenant James Eichner of the 2nd Ranger Battalion squints through the salt spray as the dark shoreline of Normandy materializes through the pre-dawn mist. The rhythmic crash of waves against steel cannot drown out the thunderous naval bombardment, targeting the German defenses at Pointe du Hoc and Omaha Beach. 29-year-old Staff Sergeant Walter Gelden checks his equipment one final time. Rifle, ammunition, grenades, climbing ropes. His hands are steady, but his stomach twists in anticipation of what awaits them. Colonel James Earl Rudder had briefed them thoroughly. Scale the 100-foot cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, neutralize the German artillery pieces supposedly positioned to rain destruction on the landing beaches, secure the coastal road. Simple objectives on paper, but as dawn breaks over the channel, revealing the sheer limestone cliffs ahead, every man in the landing craft understands the brutal reality they face. The air smells of diesel fuel, vomit, and fear. Lieutenant Sidney Solomon, the battalion surgeon, checks his medical supplies again. He will need them soon, very soon. 3 miles east, another group of Rangers from companies D, E, and F approach Omaha Beach. Their mission? Land at the base of a promontory the Americans have designated Pointe de la Percée, a section of Omaha Beach the men will soon know only as Dog White. They must secure the vital exit routes off the beach, pathways known as draws, particularly one designated as D1. Without securing these exits, the entire invasion force would be trapped on the killing ground of the beach. Lieutenant Joseph Dawson of Company G checks his watch. According to plan, by now the beach defenses should be suppressed by bombing and naval fire. The initial assault waves should have pushed inland. His Rangers are to follow and move through them. None of the men know that almost nothing is going according to plan. The bombers have dropped their payloads too far inland. The naval bombardment, while impressive, has failed to destroy the concrete bunkers and gun emplacements overlooking the landing zones. And the rough seas are pushing landing craft off course, disrupting the careful sequencing of the assault. As the landing craft approach their destinations, the German defenders wait in their fortified positions. They have spent 4 years preparing for this moment. Machine gun nests with interlocking fields of fire, artillery pre-sighted on the beach approaches, mines, barbed wire, concrete bunkers, and in those bunkers, soldiers of the 352nd Infantry Division, not the second-rate static troops Allied intelligence had predicted, but a full-strength, battle-hardened German division that had been moved to the coast just weeks before. The gray light of dawn reveals the horrific tableau that awaits. Steel obstacles emerging from the surf like the skeletal remains of prehistoric monsters, their surfaces studded with mines. Beyond them lies open beach offering no cover, then seawall, then bluffs honeycombed with German positions. In the final moments before landing, an unnatural silence falls across the water. The naval bombardment ceases to allow the landing craft their final approach. The Rangers check their weapons one last time. Some pray. Others stare straight ahead, faces empty of expression, minds already calculating angles of fire, routes of advance, chances of survival. The landing craft commander turns to Lieutenant Eichner. 1 minute! The slaughter is about to begin. June 6, 1944, 0630, Omaha Beach. The ramp of LCA 668 splashes down into the churning surf. Staff Sergeant William Elrod Petty is first out, water immediately rising to his chest. Somewhere to his right, a German MG-42 machine gun opens up, its distinctive ripping sound earning it the nickname Hitler's buzzsaw among Allied troops. The weapon fires at 1,200 rounds per minute, twice the rate of American machine guns. The water around Petty erupts in small geysers as bullets seek targets. "Move! Move! Move!" Petty screams. though his voice is almost inaudible against the cacophony of gunfire, explosions, and the screams of the wounded and dying. 29 men from Company A, 2nd Rangers, have just landed at Charlie sector of Omaha Beach, about a mile east of where they were supposed to land. This navigation error places them directly in front of a German strongpoint designated WN-70 by Allied intelligence. Inside that concrete fortification, German gunners methodically traverse their weapons across the beach. Lieutenant Robert Edlund splashes through the water, trying to orient himself. Nothing looks like the terrain models and maps they had studied in England. Men are falling around him, blood clouding the water. The beach obstacles, Belgian gates, hedgehogs, and tetrahedra provide the only meager cover, but many are mined. Corporal John Moody reaches the first line of obstacles and presses himself against the barnacle-encrusted metal of a hedgehog. His breath comes in ragged gasps as bullets whine off the steel just inches from his head. To his right, a ranger he doesn't recognize takes a direct hit to the face from an MG-42 burst. The man's helmet flies backward as his body collapses face first into the bloody surf. The tide is rising at a rate of 1 foot per hour. Soon, the limited cover provided by the beach obstacles will be underwater. The men must move forward or die. Lieutenant Charles Parker Jr. has managed to reach the foot of the seawall with a handful of men. Bullets kick up sand around them as they press themselves into the earth. Parker's radio man lies dead 10 yards back, his radio destroyed. Of the 37 men in the landing craft, only 12 have made it this far. "Bangalore! We need a Bangalore!" Parker shouts above the din. Sergeant William Courtney nods and crawls back toward a fallen comrade who carried sections of the Bangalore torpedo, a tube-like explosive device designed to clear paths through barbed wire. As Courtney moves, an artillery shell lands 15 yards away, sending up a geyser of sand and human remains. When the sand settles, Courtney doesn't move again. Parker turns to Petty. "We need to get off this beach, Sergeant." Petty's face is a mask of determination streaked with blood, not his own. He nods, scans the bluff face ahead of them, and points to a barely visible drainage culvert. "There, that's our way." As if in response, a German stick grenade, a potato masher, lands 5 feet from them. Petty reacts instantly, grabbing the grenade and hurling it back toward the top of the bluff. The explosion sends dirt and rock fragments raining down. Whether it killed its thrower, no one will ever know. "Follow me!" Petty shouts, and begins crawling toward the drainage ditch, keeping the seawall between himself and the German positions above. 4 men follow immediately. 3 more remain frozen, eyes wide with terror as bullets continue to snap overhead. Behind them, the tide continues to rise, washing blood and bodies back and forth in the surf. The thunder of naval guns resumes, though their shells fall harmlessly behind the German positions. Landing craft continue to disgorge men into the killing zone, many cut down before they can take 3 steps. And still, the Rangers crawl forward, yard by bloody yard. June 6, 1944, 0645, Omaha Beach, Dog White Sector. Lieutenant Charles H. Lomell pulls himself over the seawall, gasping for breath. Sand and small stones dig into his palms as he presses himself flat. Of the 35 men who had followed him from the landing craft, fewer than half remain. The rest float in the rising tide or lie motionless on the beach behind him. The seawall provides momentary shelter from the direct fire sweeping the beach, but not from the artillery and mortars. A German 88mm shell screams in, detonating 30 yards to Lomell's right. The concussion is like a physical blow, and when his vision clears, he sees 2 more Rangers down. Private McNamara missing most of his right leg, and Corporal Brandt lying unnaturally still, half his head gone. "Medic!" someone screams, but Battalion Surgeon Sidney Solomon is pinned down 200 yards away, desperately trying to keep wounded men from drowning in the rising tide. Lieutenant Joseph Dawson of Company G crawls to Lomell's position. His face is gray with exhaustion and strain, but his voice remains steady. "We need to get the hell off this beach and up that draw." He gestures toward a barely visible gap in the bluffs ahead, the vital D1 exit. Lommel nods. German machine gun nests on both sides of the draw, At least two that I've spotted, probably more. We'll never take it frontally, Dawson says. A few yards away, Staff Sergeant Frank South overhears the officers. Sir, there's a gully to the right. Looks like drainage. Might give us cover to work around the flank. Dawson squints through the smoke and dust. I see it. He turns to Lomell. I'll take 20 men that way. Can you get some fire on those positions when we move? With what? Half our weapons are soaked or jammed with sand. Lomell gestures to the pitiful collection of functioning equipment gathered around them. Use what we've got. We move in 3 minutes. As Dawson crawls away to gather his assault team, Lomell organizes the remaining functional weapons. 3 M1 rifles, 1 BAR, Browning automatic rifle, and a handful of grenades. It would have to be enough. The men check weapons, say quick prayers, or stare blankly at the cliff face above them. The sound of the MG-42s never ceases, a constant industrial buzz punctuated by the sharper crack of rifle fire and the deep crump of mortars. Lomell looks at his watch. 30 seconds. Private First Class James Foreman suddenly grips Lommell's arm. Sir, look! He points toward the water. Through gaps in the smoke, they can see the next wave of landing craft approaching. More men being fed into the slaughter. Now! Lomell shouts. The BAR opens up, its distinctive slower cyclic rate a counterpoint to the German MG-42s. The few riflemen add their fire, aiming at the muzzle flashes visible from the German positions. Dawson and his men are up and running, bent double as they sprint for the drainage gully. German fire immediately shifts to the moving targets. 2 men go down in the first seconds. 3 more make it 10 yards before being cut down. But Dawson and 12 others reach the relative shelter of the gully. From his position, Lomell can see them begin working their way upward, using every fold in the ground for cover. The German gunners, focused on the beach, haven't yet spotted the flanking movement. Another mortar round lands close enough to shower Lomell with dirt and rock fragments. When he wipes the debris from his eyes, he sees Dawson's group has almost reached a position level with the German bunker. Keep firing, Lomell orders, though the BAR gunner needs no encouragement. The Rangers maintain their suppressive fire, drawing attention away from Dawson's flanking attempt. Suddenly, a new sound joins the cacophony, the distinctive crump of American grenades. Dawson's men have reached their position. Smoke billows from the apertures of the German bunker. For a moment, the machine gun falls silent. In that moment of respite, Lomell makes his decision. Let's go! Up and at 'em! He rises to a crouch and begins moving forward, the remaining Rangers following his lead. The battle for the D1 draw has only just begun. June 6, 1944, 0700, Pointe du Hoc. 3 miles west of the chaos at Omaha Beach, Colonel James Earl Rudder watches as the first landing craft carrying his Rangers approached the base of the 100-foot cliffs. Original plans called for a pre-dawn assault, but rough seas and navigation problems have delayed them by more than 30 minutes. Now they will climb in daylight, fully exposed to German defenders above. DUKW amphibious vehicles, equipped with extension ladders, specially modified for this mission, sputter and stall in the rough surf. The 1,600-pound rocket-propelled grappling hooks, designed to shoot climbing ropes to the cliff top, misfire or fall short. Only a handful of ropes reach the top, most dangling uselessly just out of reach. We're going to have to do this the hard way, Rudder tells his executive officer, Major Max Schneider. The hard way means climbing with ropes and extension ladders, fully exposed to enemy fire. As the first landing craft drop their ramps, German defenders open fire with rifles, machine guns, and grenades. The Rangers are met with a hail of bullets and exploding charges. Private First Class Lester Heglin watches as a potato masher grenade bounces off his landing craft's ramp. The explosion kills 2 Rangers instantly. Sergeant William Elrod Petty is one of the first to begin climbing. Using toggle ropes with wooden toggles spaced along their length to provide handholds, he starts up the cliff face. Loose soil and rocks cascade down on him as German defenders cut some of the ropes and throw grenades over the edge. Staff Sergeant William Stivison reaches a ledge 30 feet up when the rope above him is cut. He plummets backward, crashing onto the rocky beach below. His neck snaps on impact, dead before medics can reach him. Lieutenant George Kirchner leads another group up the eastern face of the point. A German stick grenade explodes nearby, peppering him with shrapnel, but he continues climbing, blood seeping through his uniform. Private First Class James Devine is hit by machine gun fire halfway up the cliff. His body hangs limp from the toggle rope, swaying gently in the sea breeze, blocking others from using that route. Despite the casualties, Rangers continue to ascend. Some use bayonets as makeshift pitons, digging them into the soil of the cliff face for extra handholds. Others employ the extension ladders from the Dukes, though many of these prove too short to reach the top. At 0708, Sergeant Leonard Lomell becomes one of the first Rangers to reach the cliff top. He immediately takes cover in a shell crater, scanning for targets. What he sees is a lunar landscape. The combined effects of naval gunfire and aerial bombardment have transformed the once grassy promontory into a cratered wasteland. Colonel Rudder reaches the top at 0715, establishing his command post in a bomb crater near the cliff edge. The scene around him is one of utter devastation. Bodies of German defenders lie amid the wreckage of their positions. American dead and wounded are scattered across the cliff face and beach below. Of the 225 Rangers who began the assault on Pointe du Hoc, fewer than 90 have reached the top unscathed. But there is no time to regroup. The mission's primary objective, the destruction of the German artillery battery that threatens the landing beaches, remains unfulfilled. Rudder turns to Lomell and Staff Sergeant Jack Kuhn. "Find those guns," he orders simply. As the two Rangers move out, German mortars begin to fall on the point. Somewhere inland, German reinforcements are already moving toward them. The small band of Rangers is isolated, surrounded, and vastly outnumbered. And the day has barely begun. June 6, 1944, 0730. Omaha Beach, Dog White Sector. Lieutenant John Spaulding and Staff Sergeant Walter Gelden crawl along the base of the seawall, gathering survivors. The beach behind them is a graveyard of men and equipment. Destroyed landing craft burn in the surf, sending columns of black smoke into the sky. Medics work frantically among the wounded, many of whom lie half-submerged in the rising tide. "We've got to get up that bluff," Spaulding says, pointing to a barely perceptible path that zigzags up the cliff face. This is not one of the established draws or exits, but a mere goat trail, possibly used by local farmers in peacetime. Gelden nods grimly. "How many men can you round up?" "Maybe 15 still capable of fighting. The rest are wounded or—" Spaulding doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Private Carlton Barrett, a diminutive soldier nicknamed Squirt, returns from a reconnaissance of the path. "There's barbed wire about halfway up, sir, and I spotted at least one machine gun position with a clear view of the lower path." Spaulding considers their options, which are few. Stay on the beach and die, or attempt the climb and possibly die. "We'll need covering fire for the first team up. Once they're established, they can cover the rest of us." Gelden volunteers to lead the first group. "Give me Barrett and 5 others. Once we're up, we'll signal." Spaulding agrees, and Gelden quickly selects his team, men with functioning weapons and, more importantly, the will to continue fighting after witnessing the slaughter on the beach. At 0745, with a final nod to Spaulding, Gelden leads his small team toward the base of the path. They move in short rushes, taking advantage of folds in the terrain and scattered debris for cover. Remarkably, they reach the path entrance without drawing fire. The German gunners focused on the larger group still pinned on the beach. The path is barely 2 feet wide in places, hugging the contour of the bluff. Gelden leads, with Barrett close behind. They climb in single file, weapons ready, expecting to meet resistance at any moment. Halfway up, they encounter the barbed wire Barrett had spotted. Gelden signals a halt and produces a pair of wire cutters. Working as quickly as silence allows, he creates a gap just large enough for a man to pass through. As the last man in the team navigates the gap, disaster strikes. A loose stone rolls underfoot, clattering down the path. The sound, insignificant amid the general din of battle, nevertheless alerts a German observer. A single shot rings out, striking Private James Simmons in the shoulder. He falls backward but is caught by Barrett before he can tumble down the cliff. More shots follow, pinging off rocks around them. "Cover!" Geldin hisses, and the Rangers press themselves against the cliff face, becoming as small as possible. The German machine gun Barrett spotted opens up, but its field of fire is limited by the path's angle against the cliff. Most rounds pass harmlessly overhead or strike the cliff above them. Geldin makes a quick decision. "Barrett, Ryan, with me. We're going to flank that gun. The rest of you stay here and return fire when I give the signal." The three men continue upward, moving at an agonizing pace, using every available bit of cover. When they reach a point level with the machine gun position, Geldin signals his companions to hold position. He removes a grenade from his belt, pulls the pin, and waits 3 precious seconds before lobbing it toward the German emplacement. The explosion is followed by screams. Barrett and Ryan immediately open fire, pouring rounds into the disoriented German position. Return fire is sporadic and inaccurate. "Now!" Geldin shouts, and the 3 men rush the position. 2 Germans lie dead amid the wreckage of their MG-42. A third, wounded but still conscious, raises his hands in surrender. Geldin secures the prisoner while Barrett signals down to Spaulding that the way is clear. Within 20 minutes, Spaulding and the remainder of his group have joined them atop the bluff. They are the first Americans to breach the German defenses at Omaha Beach, establishing a tenuous foothold that will eventually allow more troops to move inland. But their position remains precarious. German forces surround them on 3 sides, and their ammunition is limited. The real fight is just beginning. June 6, 1944, 0800, inland from Pointe du Hoc. Sergeant Leonard Lomell and Staff Sergeant Jack Kuhn move cautiously through a wooded area about a kilometer inland from the clifftop. Their mission, to locate and destroy the German artillery battery supposedly positioned at Pointe du Hoc, has taken an unexpected turn. Upon reaching the designated gun emplacements at the point, they found only wooden dummies, decoys meant to draw Allied fire. The real guns must be elsewhere. Following a dirt farm track, Lomell and Kuhn freeze at the sound of voices, German voices. Dropping to their stomachs, they crawl forward until they can observe a clearing through the underbrush. What they see vindicates their search. 5 155mm howitzers, the guns they've been sent to destroy, are positioned in an orchard, carefully camouflaged with netting and tree branches. About a dozen German artillerymen move around the position, apparently preparing the guns for firing. Ammunition boxes are stacked nearby. Lomell turns to Kuhn and whispers, "Those guns could be operational in minutes. They're aimed directly at Utah Beach." Utah Beach, several miles to the west, is where the U.S. 4th Infantry Division is landing. If these guns open fire, thousands of American soldiers will be slaughtered. "We have to take them out," Kuhn responds, "but there are too many Germans." Lomell studies the situation, noting that most of the German crew appears to be gathered near a farmhouse about 50 yards from the guns, perhaps taking breakfast. Only 2 guards remain near the battery itself. "I've got thermite grenades," Lomell says, referring to the special incendiary devices designed specifically to destroy artillery pieces. "If we can get close enough." Kuhn nods. "I'll cover you." The 2 Rangers backtrack slightly, then circle around to approach the battery from behind a hedgerow. Moving with the stealth their Ranger training has instilled, they reach a position just 20 yards from the nearest gun without being detected. When the 2 German guards move to the far end of the battery, Lomell makes his move. Sprinting from cover, thermite grenade in hand, he reaches the first howitzer. Working quickly, he places the grenade in the gun's traversing mechanism, the most vulnerable point. He moves to the second gun, repeating the process. Kuhn, providing cover, spots a German soldier emerging from the farmhouse. Taking careful aim with his M1 rifle, he squeezes the trigger. The German falls. The shot alerts the others and shouts of alarm ring out. Lomell has reached the third gun when rifle fire begins to kick up dirt around him. He dives behind the gun's armored shield, then continues his work, placing thermite grenades on each of the remaining guns. "Time to go," he shouts to Kuhn, who provides covering fire as Lomell sprints back toward the hedgerow. As they retreat, the first thermite grenade ignites. Unlike conventional explosives, thermite produces an intensely hot chemical reaction, over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, that melts through steel. The gun's traversing mechanism begins to glow cherry red, then white hot, before liquefying entirely. One by one, the other grenades activate. German soldiers rush to the battery but can do nothing to stop the destruction. The guns that could have massacred thousands of Americans landing on Utah Beach are permanently disabled. Lomell and Kuhn make their way back toward Pointe du Hoc, occasionally exchanging fire with German patrols. When they finally reach Colonel Rudder's position at 0930, they bring the first good news of the day. The primary mission objective has been accomplished. But the Rangers' ordeal is far from over. German counterattacks have begun in earnest, and their position on the point remains tenuous at best. Of the original 225 men who began the assault, fewer than 75 remain combat effective, and relief is nowhere in sight. June 6, 1944, 0815, Omaha Beach, Easy Red Sector. Brigadier General Norman Dutch Coda, Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Infantry Division, wades ashore amid chaos and carnage. His landing craft has deposited him and his small command group nearly 1,000 yards east of their intended landing zone. The scene that greets him is apocalyptic. Hundreds of bodies float in the surf or lie sprawled across the sand. Wounded men cry out for medics, for water, for their mothers. Leaderless groups of soldiers huddle behind the seawall or whatever scant cover they can find, paralyzed by the murderous fire raining down from German positions. Coda's aide, Captain Schoenleb, gestures toward a group of Rangers pinned down behind a disabled tank. "Sir, I believe those are men from the 2nd Rangers." Coda nods and begins making his way toward them, seemingly oblivious to the bullets kicking up sand around him. At 51, he is one of the oldest men on the beach, yet he moves with a determined energy that belies his age. Reaching the Rangers' position, Coda crouches beside a lieutenant he recognizes as Joe Dawson. "What's the situation here, Lieutenant?" Dawson, his face streaked with blood and grime, gestures toward the bluffs. "We've got men up on the high ground, sir, Spaulding and about 15 others, but they're isolated and running low on ammunition." Coda surveys the terrain, eyes narrowing as he considers options. "We need to get more men up there to reinforce them." "We've tried, sir. The Germans have every approach covered." Coda's response is immediate and direct. "Rangers, listen up." His voice somehow cuts through the din of battle. "Rangers, lead the way. Move out and draw their fire. We'll support you from here." The famous phrase, "Rangers lead the way," which will later become the Ranger motto, galvanizes the men. Lieutenant Dawson gathers a group of about 20 Rangers, their ranks supplemented by regular infantry who have found themselves mixed in with the elite troops. Under covering fire from Coda's position, Dawson leads his men toward the base of the bluff, zigzagging to present difficult targets. German machine guns open up immediately, but the covering fire from the beach forces the gunners to duck periodically, creating momentary gaps in their killing zone. Incredibly, Dawson's group reaches the base of the path that Spaulding and Gelden had ascended earlier. They begin climbing, moving as rapidly as the narrow trail allows. German grenades bounce down the slope, some exploding harmlessly, others taking a terrible toll. Private Paul Sullivan, just 19 years old, takes a grenade fragment to the throat. He stumbles backward, clutching at the wound, before toppling off the path and falling 30 feet to the rocks below. Despite the casualties, the Rangers continue upward. When they encounter the barbed wire that had briefly halted Gelden's group, they find it already cut, evidence that they are on the right track. Near the top, they come under fire from a German position that Spaulding's men had missed. A small bunker built into the cliff face, housing a single MG-42 and 3-man crew. The lead Rangers go to ground, pinned by the murderous fire. Back on the beach, Coda observes the holdup through binoculars. "We need to get some firepower on that bunker," he tells Captain Schoenleb. "Find me a working bazooka." Minutes later, a bazooka team from the 116th Infantry is in position. Taking careful aim at the bunker aperture, they fire. The rocket streaks upward, slightly off target, but close enough that the explosion temporarily forces the German gunners to take cover. In that brief respite, Dawson and his Rangers rush the position. A fierce, close-quarters battle ensues. Private First Class Thomas Mulvaney tosses a grenade through the bunker's firing slit. The explosion is followed by screams from inside. Ranger Lieutenant Frank South is first through the bunker door, Thompson's submachine gun blazing. When the smoke clears, all three German defenders lie dead amid the wreckage of their position. By 0845, Dawson's group has linked up with Spaulding's men on the bluff top. They now have approximately 40 effectives holding a small perimeter about 200 yards wide. It's a tenuous foothold, but it's enough to begin the crucial process of expanding the beachhead. General Coda, having witnessed the successful breach, begins organizing more men to exploit the gap. His leadership and the Rangers' determination have created the first viable exit from the killing zone of Omaha Beach. The tide of battle is beginning, ever so slightly, to turn. June 6, 1944, 0900, Pointe du Hoc. Colonel Rudder's command post has become a makeshift aid station. Wounded Rangers lie in shallow depressions or behind whatever cover can be found. Battalion Surgeon Walter Block, himself wounded in the landing, moves among them, administering morphine and applying field dressings. The situation is growing desperate. German counterattacks have increased in intensity over the past hour. Mortar fire rains down at regular intervals. Snipers target anyone who moves in the open, and ammunition is running critically low. "How much longer can we hold?" Major Max Schneider asks, ducking as a bullet whines overhead. Rudder consults his map, though he hardly needs to. Their position is painfully clear, cut off, surrounded, with their backs to a 100-foot cliff. "We hold until relieved," he says simply. That was the plan. According to that plan, forces moving inland from Omaha Beach should have linked up with the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc by now. But there is no sign of relief. Unknown to Rudder, the situation at Omaha has deteriorated to the point where amphibious operations were briefly suspended. The follow-up forces meant to reinforce his Rangers are either dead on the beach or still circling in landing craft offshore. A runner approaches, keeping low. "Colonel, Sergeant Lomell reports enemy infantry massing for an attack from the east, at least company strength." Rudder nods. "Tell Lomell to hold his fire until they're within 50 yards. Make every shot count." As the runner departs, Rudder turns to his radio operator. "Any luck raising division?" The radio man shakes his head. "Still no contact, sir. Either the radio's damaged or they can't hear us." Rudder's expression doesn't change, but the implications are clear. Without communication, the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc might as well be on the moon. No one knows their situation. No one is coming to help. At the eastern perimeter, Sergeant Lomell positions his few remaining men among the shell craters and ruins of German bunkers. He distributes the last of the ammunition, allocating it based on who has proven to be the best shot. Each man gets no more than 20 rounds. "Remember," he tells them, "wait until you can see their faces. One shot, one kill." Private First Class Lester Hegland, one of the youngest Rangers at just 20 years old, checks his rifle with trembling hands. "What happens if they overrun us, Sarge?" Lomell's face is a mask of determination. That's not going to happen. At 0915, the German attack begins. A line of Feldgrau-clad figures emerges from the tree line, advancing cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they meet no resistance. "Steady," Lomell murmurs. "Steady." At 50 yards, he gives the order. "Fire!" A dozen rifles crack in unison. 8 Germans fall in the first volley. The others dive for cover, momentarily confused by the unexpected resistance. The Rangers work their bolts and fire again, and again. Each shot is carefully aimed, the product of endless training. Despite their desperate situation, the Rangers maintain fire discipline, picking their targets methodically. The German advance falters, then resumes as an officer rallies the men. They begin working forward in short rushes, using shell craters and uneven ground for cover. Lomell's men continue firing until the Germans close to within grenade range. "Grenades!" Lomell calls, and a half-dozen fragmentation grenades arc toward the advancing Germans. The explosions temporarily halt the attack, but Lomell knows it's only a reprieve. His men have fired nearly all their ammunition, and there are still at least 30 Germans advancing toward their position. At the critical moment, when it seems the German assault must surely overwhelm them, a new sound joins the battle. The distinctive crack of American M1 rifles, but from an unexpected direction. Fire pours into the flank of the German attack from the west. First Lieutenant Charles Parker and 15 Rangers, who had been presumed lost during the initial assault, have arrived on the scene. Parker had led his men inland after scaling the cliffs west of the main assault, becoming separated from the main force. Now, they hit the attacking Germans from an unexpected quarter, catching them in a deadly crossfire. The German attack collapses in confusion. Those not killed or wounded retreat hastily back into the tree line. When Parker reaches Lomell's position, the two men clasp hands briefly. "Damn good to see you," Lomell says, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. Parker grins, though the expression doesn't reach his eyes. "Looks like we got here just in time. You bring any ammunition?" "Some. Not much." Lomell nods toward the German dead. "We'll take theirs." Their rifles chamber the same 7.92mm round. Not ideal, but it'll fire. As Rangers move cautiously forward to scavenge ammunition and weapons from the German casualties, both officers know they've won nothing but time. The Germans will be back, in greater numbers and with heavier weapons, and still, there is no sign of relief. June 6, 1944, 10 o'clock. Omaha Beach, Dog White Sector. The slaughter continues unabated. The beach is a graveyard of men and equipment. Landing craft burn in the surf, adding black smoke to the confusion. Medics attend to the wounded where they fell, often working in water as the tide continues to rise. Many of the wounded drown before help can reach them. Lieutenant Robert Edlin, one of the few officers of Company E still alive and unwounded, has gathered a small group of Rangers behind a disabled tank. Among them is Lieutenant Joseph Eichner, the battalion communications officer, who has been trying unsuccessfully to coordinate with naval fire support. "We've got to get off this beach," Edlin says, shouting to be heard above the din. "We're just dying here." Eichner nods grimly. He points to a defile about 200 yards to their right, a narrow gully cutting through the bluff face. "Dawson and Spaulding went up somewhere near there. Maybe we can follow." The gully, later to be known simply as Spaulding's Draw, with the spelling altered, represents their best chance for survival. But reaching it means crossing 200 yards of open beach swept by German fire. "We'll need covering fire," Edlin says, scanning their small group. "Who's still got a working weapon?" Only 4 men raise their hands. The others have rifles clogged with sand or soaked with seawater, or they've simply run out of ammunition. "Not enough," Eichner says, stating the obvious. As they debate their options, a figure emerges from the smoke to their left. A tall, lean officer wearing the insignia of the 5th Ranger Battalion. It's Lieutenant George Whittington, leading what remains of his platoon. "Edlin, you boys look like you could use some help," Whittington calls. The reinforcement brings their numbers to about 20 effectives. Still not many, but enough to attempt a breakout. Edlin quickly outlines the plan, a dash for the draw under covering fire. Whittington agrees, adding, "I've got 2 BAR men. They can give us a good base of fire." At 10:15, they put the plan into action. The BAR gunners position themselves to provide maximum coverage of the German positions visible on the bluff. The riflemen prepare to move in small groups, leapfrogging toward the draw. "First team, go!" Edlin commands, and 5 Rangers sprint across the sand, zigzagging as they run. German fire immediately intensifies, bullets kicking up sand around the running men. 2 go down before reaching the halfway point. The other 3 make it to the base of the bluff, temporarily sheltered by the steep slope. The bar gunners pour fire into the German positions, forcing the defenders to duck momentarily. "Second team, go!" Whittington shouts, and another group makes their dash. This process continues, each group drawing slightly less fire as the German positions come under increasing pressure from the Rangers' covering fire and from naval guns that have finally found the range. By 10:30, 14 Rangers have reached the base of the draw. Edlin and Whittington are the last to make the dash, running side by side across the bullet-swept sand. A German sniper targets them specifically, recognizing them as officers. Whittington takes a round through the shoulder but keeps running. Edlin reaches him, half dragging him the final yards to safety. At the base of the draw, they regroup. The path upward is steep and narrow, with loose soil underfoot. Signs of earlier fighting are evident: spent cartridge casings, bloodstains on the rocks, a discarded helmet with a bullet hole through its center. "I'll take point," Private First Class John Lyman volunteers. At 22, he's one of the older privates, a former steelworker from Pennsylvania with a reputation for steady nerves. Lyman begins the ascent, rifle at the ready. The others follow in single file, alert for any sign of German defenders. Whittington, his wounded arm roughly bandaged, insists on staying with the group rather than remaining behind. Halfway up, they encounter their first resistance. A German soldier appears on a ledge above, leveling his carabiner 98K rifle. Lyman fires first, his M1 cracking in the confined space. The German falls, tumbling down the steep slope. The shot alerts other defenders. Bullets begin to strike around them, ricocheting off rocks in deadly splinters of lead and stone. The Rangers press themselves against the earth, becoming as small as possible. "Grenades!" Edlin orders, and those who still have them remove the fragmentation grenades from their webbing. On a count of 3, 5 grenades arc upward toward the unseen German positions. The explosions send dirt and rock fragments showering down, momentarily silencing the enemy fire. "Move! Move!" Edlin shouts, and the Rangers resume their ascent, moving as rapidly as the terrain allows. Near the top, they encounter a final obstacle: a machine gun nest constructed of sandbags and timber, blocking the exit from the draw. Before they can react, the MG-42 opens fire, the rounds so close together they sound like tearing cloth. The lead Rangers go to ground, pinned by the murderous fire. Those behind are stacked up in the narrow confines of the draw, unable to advance or retreat. It's a moment of crisis, trapped in the open with no cover. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then Private Lyman does something either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. He rises from his prone position and charges directly at the machine gun nest, firing his M1 from the hip as he runs. The German gunner, startled by the lone figure sprinting toward him, traverses his weapon to track Lyman. In that critical moment of distraction, the other Rangers open fire, pouring rounds into the machine gun position. Lyman reaches the nest and dives over the sandbags, disappearing from view. There's a brief struggle, the sound of a single pistol shot, then silence. For a terrible moment, the Rangers below fear the worst. Then Lyman's face appears above the sandbags, blood streaming from a scalp wound, but very much alive. He waves them forward. By 11 o'clock, Edlin, Whittington, and their men have established another foothold on the bluff top, linking up with elements of the 116th Infantry, who have also managed to break through. Slowly, painfully, the American perimeter is expanding, but the cost has been staggering. Of the approximately 225 men of the 2nd Ranger Battalion who landed in the first wave at Omaha Beach, fewer than 90 remain unwounded and combat effective. And the day is far from over. June 6, 1944, 11:30, inland from Omaha Beach. Lieutenant Charles Lomell leads a patrol of 12 Rangers through hedgerow country, moving cautiously westward toward Pointe du Hoc. Their mission: to link up with Colonel Rutter's isolated force and provide relief. The bocage, Normandy's distinctive landscape of small fields enclosed by ancient hedgerows, provides excellent defensive terrain. Each hedgerow is a natural fortification, some with roots dating back to Roman times, creating walls of earth and vegetation up to 15 feet thick at the base and 10 feet high. Every field crossing is a potential ambush point. "Hold up," Sergeant Julius Belcher whispers, raising a closed fist, the signal to stop. The patrol freezes in place, rifles ready. Ahead, the sound of an engine growls, the distinctive noise of a German half-track. Lommel signals his men to take cover in the ditches that run along the base of the hedgerows. The vehicle appears at the intersection of two farm tracks, an SDKFZ 251 half-track carrying about 10 German infantrymen. The soldiers appear relaxed, some smoking, apparently unaware of American troops in the vicinity. Lommel faces a quick decision. His small patrol is outnumbered, but they have the element of surprise. Engaging might alert other German units in the area, but letting the half-track proceed means these Germans could reinforce those already pressuring Rudder's position at the point. He decides to act. Using hand signals, he positions his men along the hedgerow, creating an L-shaped ambush. When the half-track reaches the optimal position, just past the intersection where it will be fully exposed to flanking fire, Lommel gives the signal. 12 rifles and 1 BAR open fire simultaneously. The driver is hit immediately, slumping over the steering wheel. The half-track veers into a ditch. German soldiers tumble from the vehicle, some already dead or wounded, others desperately seeking cover. The firefight is brief and one-sided. Within minutes, all the Germans are down. Sergeant Belcher moves forward cautiously to check for survivors. 3 still breathing, sir, he reports back. 2 badly wounded. 1 looks like he might make it. Lommel nods. Disarm them and patch them up as best you can. We can't take prisoners with us, but we're not going to shoot wounded men either. As Ranger Medic Sidney Solomon tends to the wounded Germans, others search the half-track for intelligence materials. Private James Eichner discovers a map case containing detailed German positions in the area. Valuable intelligence that could save many American lives. The brief engagement has cost them surprise and time. Lommel knows other German units must have heard the firing. We need to move, he tells his men. Leave the wounded where passing Germans will find them. Take the map case and any ammunition compatible with our weapons. The patrol continues westward, now moving with even greater caution. The sound of distant firing grows louder as they approach Pointe du Hoc, where Rudder's Rangers are still holding out against German counterattacks. At 12:15, they encounter their first evidence of the desperate fighting at the point, the bodies of 3 Rangers and 6 Germans lying where they fell in a vicious skirmish. From the positions, it appears the Rangers had been on a patrol similar to their own, perhaps seeking help from the Omaha beachhead. The sight adds urgency to their mission. Lommel sets a quicker pace, accepting greater risk to reach their besieged comrades. At 12:45, they spot the first German positions encircling Pointe du Hoc, machine gun nests and mortar emplacements established to contain the American force that had scaled the cliffs. From their vantage point in a copse of trees, Lommel's patrol can see German infantry moving between positions, tightening the noose around Rudder's men. We'll never fight through that, Sergeant Belcher observes grimly. Lommel studies the German positions through his binoculars. We don't have to fight through. We just have to disrupt them enough for Rudder's men to break out in our direction. He points to a German mortar position about 300 yards away. That's our first target. If we take that out, we can use their own mortar against the other positions. The plan is audacious but feasible. Using the hedgerows for cover, the patrol works its way to within 50 yards of the German mortar team. The Germans, focused on adjusting fire against the Rangers at the point, remain unaware of the threat behind them. At Lommel's signal, the Rangers open fire. The 4-man German mortar team is eliminated in seconds. Lommel and 3 others rush forward to secure the position, while the rest of the patrol provides covering fire. Sergeant Raymond Flanagan, who had served in an artillery unit before volunteering for the Rangers, quickly familiarizes himself with the captured German 81mm mortar. It's not that different from ours, he says, adjusting the sight. Give me some coordinates and we can start putting rounds on those other German positions. For the next 30 minutes, Lommel's small force wreaks havoc on the German encirclement. The captured mortar rains shells on machine gun nests and infantry concentrations. When German units attempt to respond, they find themselves under accurate rifle fire from unseen positions among the hedgerows. The German forces, believing they're under attack by a much larger American force, begin to pull back from their positions facing Pointe du Hoc, creating a gap in their encirclement. At the point, Colonel Rudder observes the unexpected bombardment of German positions through his binoculars. "Someone's out there giving Jerry a hard time," he tells Major Schneider. "Might be our chance to establish contact with the main force." Rudder organizes a sortie. 20 Rangers under Lieutenant Eichner will attempt to break through the weakened German line and link up with whatever friendly forces are operating in the area. At 13:30, as Lomell's patrol continues to harass the German positions, they spot a group of Rangers moving toward them from the direction of Pointe du Hoc. The relief force has made contact with the isolated Rangers, creating a tenuous corridor between the point and the expanding American beachhead. But the success is momentary. German reinforcements, including elements of the 352nd Infantry Division, are already moving into the area. The battle for Pointe du Hoc, and indeed for all of Omaha Beach, is far from over. June 6, 1944, 1400, Pointe du Hoc. Colonel Rudder studies the map Lieutenant Lomell has brought, showing German positions between the point and Omaha Beach. The news is sobering. Despite the Rangers' success in establishing a brief corridor, German forces are regrouping. The 352nd Infantry Division, a unit whose presence in the area had come as a complete surprise to Allied intelligence, is moving reinforcements to seal the gap. "We're still cut off," Rudder concludes, returning the map to Lomell. The situation at the point remains desperate. Of the original 225 Rangers who began the assault, fewer than 90 remain capable of fighting. Ammunition is critically low. Food and water are in short supply. And the wounded, nearly 70 men, require medical attention beyond what Battalion Surgeon Walter Block can provide with his limited supplies. "What about evacuation?" Major Schneider asks, gesturing toward the cliff edge where the assault had begun hours earlier. "Could we get some of the wounded out by sea?" Rudder shakes his head. "Too risky. The German artillery inland would target any landing craft approaching the point. We'd lose more men than we'd save." The decision is difficult but necessary. They must hold their position and wait for relief from the main force pushing inland from Omaha Beach. But that relief seems increasingly unlikely as German resistance stiffens. At 14:30, the German counterattack begins in earnest. Mortar rounds begin falling on the Ranger positions with increasing accuracy. Machine gun fire sweeps the perimeter, and through gaps in the smoke and dust, they can see German infantry advancing in strength, at least a company, possibly more. Rudder moves among his men, positioning them to best advantage among the shell craters and ruined bunkers that litter the battlefield. "Make every shot count," he tells them, aware that some men are down to their last few rounds of ammunition. The German attack comes from 3 directions simultaneously, a coordinated effort to overwhelm the depleted Ranger force. Lieutenant Lomell commands the eastern perimeter, where the heaviest assault falls. With only 15 men to cover a front of nearly 200 yards, he positions his best marksmen to target German officers and NCOs, hoping to disrupt the enemy's command structure. The strategy works initially. Several German officers fall to precision rifle fire, temporarily disorganizing the attack. But the sheer weight of numbers begins to tell. German infantry push forward in short rushes, gaining ground yard by bloody yard. By 1500, the situation appears hopeless. The German forces have penetrated the perimeter in several places, forcing the Rangers back into an ever-tightening circle centered on Rudder's command post. Hand-to-hand fighting erupts as the opposing forces intermingle, making it impossible for supporting weapons on either side to fire without hitting their own men. Private First Class James Devine finds himself face-to-face with a German Feldwebel, sergeant, in the ruins of a bunker. Both men have empty rifles. The German draws a bayonet. Devine, his own bayonet lost during the cliff climb, pulls his trench knife. The struggle is brief and vicious. Devine emerges from the bunker alone, blood streaming from a gash in his forearm, but otherwise intact. Similar desperate encounters occur across the battlefield as the Rangers fight with whatever comes to hand: knives, entrenching tools, rifle butts, and bare fists. At the critical moment, when the German breakthrough seems inevitable, the tide suddenly turns. Naval gunfire, precise and devastating, begins falling just beyond the Ranger perimeter, catching the German reinforcements as they move up to exploit the initial penetration. The USS Augusta, guided by a forward observer who has finally established radio contact, delivers 5-inch shells with pinpoint accuracy. The German attack falters in the face of this unexpected bombardment. Those units already engaged with the Rangers find themselves cut off from support and begin to withdraw. By 15:30, the immediate crisis has passed. The Rangers have maintained their hold on Pointe du Hoc, though at terrible cost. 20 more men lie dead or seriously wounded. Ammunition is now almost entirely exhausted. Many men have only a single magazine or clip remaining. Rudder gathers his officers. "We've bought some time, but they'll be back, and we can't count on naval gunfire being available next time." He turns to Lieutenant Eichner, the communications officer. "Any luck raising division headquarters?" Eichner shakes his head. "Still nothing, sir. Either our radio is damaged or they're not receiving." The implications are clear. No one in the main American force knows the Rangers' situation. Relief may not be coming. As darkness approaches, Rudder makes his decision. "We hold through the night. At dawn, those still able will attempt to break out toward Omaha Beach. The wounded will remain here with a small guard force." The Rangers prepare for a long night, distributing the remaining ammunition, water, and medical supplies. They improve their positions as best they can, digging deeper into the shell-pocked earth of Pointe du Hoc. As the sun begins to set over the English Channel, casting long shadows across the battlefield, no one speaks the thought uppermost in every mind, that dawn may find too few of them left alive to attempt any breakout. The night ahead promises to be the longest of their lives. June 6, 1944, $1,600, Omaha Beach, Dog White Sector. The situation has changed dramatically since the morning's slaughter. American forces have established a tenuous but growing beachhead. Landing craft continue to deliver men and equipment. Engineers work frantically to clear obstacles from the beach, opening lanes for vehicles and heavy weapons. Lieutenant Robert Edlin, one of the few surviving officers from the initial Ranger landing, takes stock of his depleted company. Of the 60 men who had followed him into the surf that morning, only 22 remain unscathed. The others are either dead, wounded, or missing. "We need to push inland," Edlin tells his men, gathered behind the seawall that had provided their first shelter hours earlier. "Rudder's boys at Pointe du Hoc are still cut off. Division wants us to try to break through to them." The men receive the news in silence. They're exhausted, physically and emotionally drained by the day's savage fighting. But these are Rangers, selected and trained for exactly these kinds of desperate missions. Sergeant William Petty checks his Thompson submachine gun. "Just tell us where to go, sir." Edlin unfolds a map, crouching to keep it from blowing away in the stiff sea breeze. "We head inland about a mile, then turn west toward Pointe du Hoc. German resistance is supposed to be lighter away from the beach defenses." At 16:30, Edlin leads his small force up the path that has been cleared through the minefield beyond the beach. They move in a loose skirmish line, weapons ready, alert for any sign of German defenders. The landscape they traverse bears the scars of intense combat. Destroyed equipment litters the ground, both American and German. Bodies lie where they fell, some in grotesque postures that testify to violent deaths. Medics and burial teams haven't yet reached this far inland. As they approach a small Norman village, little more than a crossroads with a few stone buildings, sniper fire cracks out. Private James Eichner grunts and falls, a bullet through his upper arm. "Cover!" Edlin orders, and the Rangers take what shelter they can find. Ditches, shell holes, the sparse hedgerows that define field boundaries. The sniper, hidden somewhere in the village, fires again. The bullet kicks up dirt near Sergeant Petty's position. Petty, a seasoned hunter in civilian life, studies the likely firing positions, calculating angles and distances. "Got him," he murmurs after a moment. "Bell tower of that church. See the missing slate on the southwest corner? He's firing through that gap." Edlin crawls to Petty's position to verify the observation. "Can you get him from here?" Petty shakes his head. "Too far for my Thompson. Need a rifle." Private First Class Carlton Barrett, nearby, offers his M1. "Here, Sarge. I qualified expert last time we were on the range." Petty waves him off. "You take the shot, Barrett. I'll tell you where to aim." Barrett, the smallest man in the company at 5'4" and 125 pounds, steadies the rifle against a fallen tree trunk. Following Petty's guidance, he aims slightly above the gap in the bell tower slates, compensating for distance. "Fire when ready," Petty says quietly. Barrett takes a deep breath, exhales halfway, and squeezes the trigger. The M1 cracks sharply. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a figure tumbles from the bell tower, plummeting to the cobblestones below. "Good shot," Petty approves, but immediately raises a cautionary hand. "Village could be full of Germans. We need to clear it systematically." Edlin organizes the approach. 3 teams will enter the village from different directions, converging on the central square. Each building must be checked for German defenders. It's slow, dangerous work. As the Rangers begin their advance, the sound of a vehicle engine grows louder, approaching from the direction of Omaha Beach. Edlin signals his men to take cover, uncertain whether the vehicle is friend or foe. An American Jeep appears, moving rapidly along the dirt road. It skids to a halt when the driver spots the Rangers. A figure in the passenger seat stands. It's General Coda, the assistant division commander who had rallied men on the beach that morning. "Rangers," Coda calls, "hold your position. Reinforcements are coming up." Within minutes, a company of the 116th Infantry arrives, accompanied by a Sherman tank. The combined force will continue the advance toward Pointe du Hoc, with Edlin's Rangers serving as guides and scouts. The village is cleared methodically, building by building. 4 more German snipers are eliminated. 7 others surrender when cornered in a stone barn. From them, Edlin learns that substantial German forces, perhaps as many as 200 men, still separate them from Rudder's isolated Rangers. By 1800, as evening approaches, the relief force has advanced only another half-mile toward Pointe du Hoc. German resistance stiffens with each forward movement. The Sherman tank proves invaluable, its 75mm gun reducing German strongpoints to rubble. But progress remains painfully slow. "We're not going to reach them today," Edlin tells General Coda as they study the map in fading light. "Maybe not tomorrow either, at this rate." Coda's weathered face shows no emotion, but his voice carries conviction. "We'll get through. Your boys at the point have held this long. They can hold another day if they have to." As darkness falls, the relief force establishes defensive positions. The night will be tense, with German infiltrators probing for weaknesses and sporadic artillery fire disrupting any attempt at rest. For Edlin and his Rangers, the day that began in the blood-soaked surf of Omaha Beach ends in a shattered Norman village, still miles from their besieged comrades. The mission continues. June 6, 1944, 1900, Pointe du Hoc. Darkness falls across the battlefield as Colonel Rudder's Rangers prepare for what promises to be a long and dangerous night. The German attacks have subsided temporarily, but no one believes the respite will last. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, German forces are regrouping. "Set up a rotating watch," Rudder instructs his officers. 1/3 of the men awake at all times. The rest get what sleep they can. Sleep seems an unlikely luxury amid the devastation of Pointe du Hoc. Shell craters pockmark the ground. The twisted wreckage of German bunkers, destroyed by naval gunfire and the Rangers' explosive charges, creates a lunar landscape. And the dead, both American and German, remain where they fell. A grim reminder of the day's savage fighting. Lieutenant Sidney Solomon, the battalion surgeon, moves among the wounded, providing what comfort he can with dwindling medical supplies. Morphine is strictly rationed, reserved for those in the most severe pain. Bandages are reused after being rinsed in seawater carried up from the base of the cliff in helmets. "How many will make it through the night?" Major Schneider asks quietly, as Solomon returns to the command post, his face gray with exhaustion. "Most of them, I hope," Solomon replies. "But we have at least 10 critical cases that need evacuation to a proper medical facility. Without that, He doesn't complete the sentence. He doesn't need to. At 2000, as full darkness envelops the battlefield, the first German probe begins. A small patrol approaching from the east, using the ruined bunkers for cover. The Ranger sentries spot them and open fire. The brief firefight ends with 4 German dead and the rest retreating into the darkness. Similar probes occur throughout the night, testing the Ranger perimeter from different directions, seeking weaknesses. Each is repulsed, but the cost is high. Precious ammunition expended, men wounded, the perimeter gradually contracting as the defenders are whittled down. By midnight, the Rangers have been reduced to their final defensive position. A rough circle, perhaps 100 yards in diameter, centered on Rudder's command post. Beyond that perimeter, German forces have infiltrated the ground the Rangers had held during daylight. They're getting ready for a major push, Lieutenant Lomell reports after returning from a reconnaissance of the forward positions. I could hear vehicles moving up, probably bringing in reinforcements. Rudder nods, unsurprised. Any sign of relief from our side? Nothing, sir, but there's heavy firing inland toward Omaha. Someone's fighting their way in this direction. The news offers a slim hope that American forces from the beachhead are attempting to break through to them. But will they arrive in time? At 01:30, a German loudspeaker crackles to life somewhere in the darkness. A voice speaking accented but clear English addresses the beleaguered Rangers. American soldiers, you are surrounded. Your position is hopeless. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You have 10 minutes to decide. The psychological warfare tactic is met with defiant shouts from the Ranger positions. No one seriously considers surrender. These men have not endured the cliff assault and the day's brutal fighting, only to lay down their arms in the night. At 0200, the expected German attack begins. Flares illuminate the battlefield with harsh white light, casting strange shadows across the cratered landscape. Under this artificial daylight, German infantry advance in strength, at least a company, perhaps more. The Rangers meet the attack with disciplined fire, targeting officers and NCOs as before. But ammunition is critically low. Some men have only a handful of rounds remaining. Others have discarded their empty rifles in favor of captured German weapons. For 20 minutes, the battle rages at close quarters. In places, the opposing forces are separated by mere yards. Grenades arc back and forth between positions. The crack of rifle fire is continuous, punctuated by the bursts of automatic weapons. The German attack stalls within feet of the command post. The cost to the Rangers is severe. Another dozen men killed or wounded. But the perimeter holds. As the Germans fall back to regroup, an unexpected sound reaches the defenders. The rumble of heavy engines approaching from the west, the direction of Omaha Beach. Tanks, Major Schneider says, his expression grim. If they've brought armor up, we can't hold. The sound grows louder, resolving into the distinctive growl of diesel engines. Rudder raises his binoculars, straining to penetrate the darkness beyond the perimeter. "Hold your fire!" he suddenly shouts. "Hold your fire! Those are Shermans!" Through gaps in the smoke and dust, the unmistakable silhouette of an American M4 Sherman tank becomes visible, followed by another and another. Behind them, infantry advance in loose formation, elements of the 116th Infantry and surviving Rangers from Omaha Beach. The relief force has broken through. As the tanks reach the Ranger perimeter, a figure emerges from the lead vehicle's turret. General Coda, the assistant division commander who had rallied men on Omaha Beach that morning. "Colonel Rudder," Coda calls. "Sorry we're late. Traffic was hell." The grim joke breaks the tension. For the first time in nearly 24 hours, the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc allow themselves to believe they might survive. Dawn is still hours away, and German forces remain in strength around them. But they are no longer alone. The longest day continues. June 7, 1944, 05:30, Pointe du Hoc. Dawn breaks over a transformed battlefield. The arrival of General Coda's relief force during the night has drastically changed the situation. American tanks and fresh infantry have established a secure perimeter around the point. Medical evacuation has begun, with the most seriously wounded Rangers being transported back to aid stations established inland from Omaha Beach. Colonel Rudder, having survived the night without sleep, meets with General Coda in what remains of a German bunker, serving as a temporary command post. "Your men performed one of the most incredible feats of the invasion," Coda tells him, genuine admiration in his voice. "Scaling those cliffs under fire, I don't know how you did it." Rudder, exhausted beyond words, merely nods. The praise, while welcome, cannot compensate for the losses his battalion has suffered. Of the 225 Rangers who began the assault on Pointe du Hoc, only 90 remain combat effective. And many of those are walking wounded, men who have refused evacuation despite injuries that would send rear echelon troops to the hospital. "What's the situation at Omaha?" Rudder asks, turning the conversation to practical matters. Coda's expression tightens. "Bloody. We took a beating yesterday, worse than anyone expected. The 116th and 16th Infantry Regiments lost nearly half their effective strength, but we've established a beachhead about a mile and a half deep in most sectors. More men and equipment landing hourly." The conversation is interrupted by Lieutenant Eichner, the communications officer. "Sir, Division Headquarters on the radio. They want a situation report." For the first time since landing at Pointe du Hoc, Rudder's Rangers have reliable communication with the main American force. The isolation that had made their position so desperate has finally ended. As the morning progresses, the full extent of the Rangers' achievement becomes clear. Despite overwhelming odds, they had accomplished their primary mission: the neutralization of the German artillery battery that threatened the landing beaches. The guns, found inland rather than at the point itself, had been disabled by Sergeant Lomell and Staff Sergeant Kuhn before they could fire a single round at the invasion fleet. Moreover, by drawing German forces to Pointe du Hoc, the Rangers had inadvertently diverted enemy resources that might otherwise have been deployed against the main landings at Omaha and Utah beaches. Their isolated stand had contributed significantly to the overall success of the invasion, though at terrible cost. By midday, reinforcements continued to arrive. Fresh Rangers from the 5th Battalion join their comrades of the 2nd Battalion. Together, they begin the grim task of recovering the dead, men who had fallen during the cliff assault or the subsequent defense of the point. Private First Class Lester Hegland and Sergeant Francis Weiner volunteer to search for bodies at the base of the cliffs. Using ropes, they descend the same sheer face they had climbed under fire 30 hours earlier. What they find is a scene of unspeakable horror. Bodies lie broken on the rocks where they fell during the assault. Others float in the surf, gently lifted and dropped by the rhythmic waves. Some are barely recognizable as human, having been in the water for more than a day. With infinite care and respect, the Rangers recover their fallen comrades. Each body is placed in a mattress cover, the only available substitute for proper burial shrouds. Each is carried up the cliff using a complex system of ropes and pulleys established by the engineers who have joined the relief force. By 1500, 23 bodies have been recovered from the base of the cliffs. Others remain missing, presumably swept out to sea by the tides. As the afternoon wears on, the surviving Rangers of D, E, and F companies gather on the battle-scarred ground of Pointe du Hoc. Colonel Rudder addresses them briefly, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Gentlemen, what you have accomplished here will not be forgotten. You have honored the Ranger tradition in the highest manner possible. Those who fell here did not die in vain." The simple ceremony concludes with a prayer offered by Captain Joseph Dawson, whose leadership had been instrumental in establishing the first foothold on Omaha Beach. By evening, the situation has stabilized enough that some men are able to rest properly for the first time since the invasion began. Hot food arrives, the first hot meal in days for the survivors of the initial assault. As darkness falls once again over Pointe du Hoc, the Rangers maintain their vigilance. German forces, though pushed back, remain active in the area. The distinctive sound of MG-42 machine guns can still be heard in the distance, reminding all that the war continues despite their victory at this small, blood-soaked promontory. Lieutenant Sidney Salomon, the battalion surgeon, makes his final rounds of the day. The most critically wounded have been evacuated, but dozens of Rangers with lesser injuries remain. Many refuse treatment, insisting that others need attention more urgently. This stoicism, characteristic of the Ranger ethos, both impresses and frustrates Salomon. "You've got a chunk of shrapnel in your shoulder, Private," he tells a young Ranger who has declined medical evacuation. "It needs to come out before infection sets in." The private, James Devine, one of the first men to reach the top of the cliff during the assault, merely shrugs, then winces at the pain the movement causes. "Others need you more, Doc." "I'll keep." Such exchanges are repeated throughout the evening, as Solomon works tirelessly to treat as many men as possible with his limited supplies. As midnight approaches, Colonel Rudder finally succumbs to exhaustion, falling into a dreamless sleep in the command bunker. For the first time in over 40 hours, he allows himself to truly rest, confident that his surviving Rangers are now secure. June 7, 1944, 9:00, Omaha Beach, Easy Red Sector. The beach that had been a killing ground 30 hours earlier now resembles a massive, chaotic supply depot. Landing craft continue to deliver men and equipment. Bulldozers push sand to create vehicle lanes. Engineers clear mines and obstacles. Military police direct traffic in a complex choreography of movement. Staff Sergeant Walter Gelden, one of the Rangers who had established the first foothold atop the bluffs on D-Day, walks the beach with Lieutenant John Spaulding. Both men are silent as they survey the scene, comparing it mentally with the hellscape they had experienced during the initial landing. "Hard to believe it's the same place," Spaulding finally says, his voice barely audible above the din of engines and shouted orders. Gelden nods. The transformation is indeed remarkable, but for him the beach will always be as it was at 0630 on June 6, swept by murderous fire, littered with the bodies of the dead and dying, a place where men faced the ultimate test and many did not survive. Their reverie is interrupted by a young lieutenant from division headquarters. "Sergeant Gelden, Lieutenant Spaulding, General Cota would like to see you." They follow the officer to a command post established in a captured German bunker overlooking the beach. Inside, Brigadier General Norman Cota, the assistant division commander who had rallied men on the beach during the worst of the fighting, is conferring with staff officers over maps of the expanding American beachhead. "Ah, the heroes of D1 draw," Cota greets them, dismissing the other officers with a gesture. "Sit down, gentlemen. I want your first-hand account of how you established that first exit from the beach. The official report needs to be accurate." For the next hour, Spaulding and Gelden recount their experiences: the desperate crawl along the seawall, the discovery of the narrow path up the bluff, the nerve-wracking climb under enemy fire. They describe the actions of Private Carlton Barrett, whose small stature had enabled him to scout ahead undetected, and the bravery of the men who followed them up the precarious route. Cota listens attentively, occasionally making notes. When they finish, he sits back, eyes distant. "That exit you secured saved countless lives," he says after a moment. "If the beach had remained sealed off any longer, we might have had to consider abandoning the Omaha landings entirely." The revelation stuns both Rangers. They had known their actions were important, but not that the fate of the entire Omaha beachhead had hung in the balance. "There will be official recognition, of course," Cota continues. "But for now, I simply wanted to thank you personally." He rises, indicating the meeting is over. "Your new assignment is to help locate and recover the dead and wounded from your battalion. There are still men unaccounted for." Outside the command post, Gelden and Spaulding stand momentarily in silence, processing what they've learned. Finally, Gelden speaks. "Let's find our boys. They deserve to go home, one way or another." The grim task of recovery begins. Bodies lie where they fell throughout the draws and along the beach. Rangers, infantrymen, engineers, naval personnel. Some have already been collected by graves registration units, their locations marked with wooden stakes bearing identification tags. Others remain undiscovered in gullies, shell craters, or tangled in the underwater obstacles that had been intended to impede the landing craft. By midday, Gelden and Spaulding have helped recover 17 bodies, 7 Rangers and 10 men from other units. The work is physically and emotionally exhausting, but both men drive themselves forward, determined to leave no one behind. At 1400, they encounter another recovery team led by Lieutenant Joseph Dawson of Company G, who had played a crucial role in securing the D1 draw. Dawson's face is a mask of fatigue, but he greets his fellow Rangers with genuine warmth. "Hell of a day, wasn't it?" he says, the simplicity of the statement belying the enormity of what they had experienced. Spaulding nods. "Hell of a day," he agrees. What more can be said about the events of June 6, 1944? No words seem adequate to capture the courage, the sacrifice, the sheer determination that had carried them through. As they continue their somber work, the tide begins to recede, revealing more bodies that had been hidden by the water. Among them, Gelden spots a familiar figure. Private Ryan Sullivan, a 20-year-old from Boston who had been in his squad. Sullivan lies face down in the sand, his pack still on his back, his rifle clutched in lifeless hands. Gelden kneels beside the body, gently turning it over. Sullivan's features are peaceful, showing none of the terror that must have filled his final moments. A single bullet wound to the chest tells the story. He had been hit early in the assault, probably dead before he hit the ground. With careful movements born of respect, Gelden removes Sullivan's dog tags. One will stay with the body, the other will be sent home to his family. He then helps place the young ranger in a body bag, another casualty of what is already being called the longest day. By sunset, the recovery teams have done all they can. Some bodies will never be found, claimed by the sea or buried under collapsed bunkers and trenches. The official casualty reports will remain incomplete, with dozens of men simply listed as missing in action. As darkness falls over Omaha Beach for the second night since the invasion, Gelden sits alone on the bluff overlooking the strand where so many had died. From here, he can see the massive logistics operation continuing below. Supply ships offloading, vehicles moving inland, fresh troops marching toward the front lines that have pushed several miles into Normandy. The invasion is succeeding, despite the terrible cost of that first day. The foothold in Hitler's fortress Europe has been established. But for Gelden and the other survivors of the initial assault, the victory is tempered by the knowledge of what it cost. In blood, in lives, in friends who will never return home. June 7, 1944, 1600, 2 miles inland from Pointe du Hoc. Sergeant Leonard Lomell, the ranger who had discovered and disabled the German artillery battery on D-Day, leads a patrol through dense hedgerow country. Their mission: to locate and engage any German forces still operating in the area. The patrol consists of 10 men, all that could be spared from the defensive perimeter at Pointe du Hoc. They move cautiously, aware that the German 352nd Infantry Division, though pushed back, remains a formidable fighting force. "Hold up," Private First Class James Eichner whispers, raising a fist, the signal to stop. The patrol freezes in place, weapons ready. Lomell moves forward to join Eichner at point position. "What is it?" he asks quietly. Eichner points to a farmhouse visible through a gap in the hedgerow. "Smoke from the chimney, and I saw movement at that window." Lomell studies the building through his binoculars. The stone farmhouse appears typical of the Norman countryside. 2 stories with a slate roof, surrounded by outbuildings. It could be occupied by civilians, or it could be a German observation post. "We'll check it out," Lomell decides. "Eichner, take 3 men around the left flank. I'll take the rest through this gap. If it's civilians, no shooting. If it's Germans, fire at will." The patrol splits as ordered. Lomell leads his group through the gap in the hedgerow, advancing in short rushes across the open field toward the farmhouse. They're halfway to the building when a burst of machine gun fire erupts from an upper window, the distinctive sound of an MG-42. "Cover!" Lomell shouts, diving behind a low stone wall that divides the field. His men follow suit, bullets kicking up dirt inches from their positions. From the left flank, Eichner and his team open fire on the farmhouse windows, providing suppressive fire that momentarily forces the German gunner to duck out of sight. "Grenades!" Lomell orders, and 2 Rangers prepare the M2 fragmentation grenades they carry. Before they can throw, however, the situation changes dramatically. The farmhouse door bursts open, and figures emerge, not German soldiers, but French civilians. An elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and two young children run from the building, hands raised, screaming in French. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Lomell shouts, recognizing the civilian non-combatants. The machine gun in the upper window opens up again, this time targeting the fleeing civilians. The elderly man falls immediately, cut nearly in half by the heavy bullets. The woman and children continue running, headed directly toward Lomell's position. Lomell makes a split-second decision. "Cover me," he yells, then vaults over the wall and sprints toward the fleeing French family. Bullets kick up dirt around him as he runs. The German gunner, clearly visible now in the upper window, traverses his weapon to track Lomell's movement. From the left flank, Eichner sees the danger. Taking careful aim with his M1 rifle, he fires at the gunner. The German jerks backward but remains at his position, still firing. Lomell reaches the woman and children, using his body to shield them as he pushes them toward the safety of the stone wall. They're 10 yards from cover when a burst from the MG-42 catches them. The woman cries out, blood blossoming on her simple dress. She falls, pulling one child down with her. With strength born of desperation, Lomell scoops up both children, a boy of perhaps 8 and a girl a few years younger, and makes the final dash to the wall. Bullets snap past his head, so close he can feel the disturbance in the air. He tumbles over the wall with the children, landing hard on his back to cushion their fall. For a moment, he lies stunned, the wind knocked from his lungs. The children, shock visible on their small faces, remain frozen in fear. "Get them back to the hedgerow," Lomell gasps to Private Ryan Tanner, who has crawled over to check on him. "I'm going for the woman." Before Tanner can protest, Lomell is up and over the wall again, running in a crouch toward where the French woman lies motionless on the field. More fire comes from the farmhouse, not just the MG-42 now, but rifle fire as well. There must be a full squad of Germans inside. Lomell reaches the woman and checks quickly for signs of life. Finding none, her chest is riddled with bullet holes. He says a quick prayer and turns back toward the wall. As he does, pain explodes in his left thigh. A bullet has found its mark. Despite the wound, he limps toward cover, each step leaving a bloody footprint in the rich Norman soil. More bullets snap past, kicking up dirt around him. Eichner and his team maintain continuous fire on the farmhouse windows, keeping the German gunners' heads down just enough to give Lomell a chance. 20 yards from the wall. 15. 10. A bullet grazes Lomell's arm, spinning him half around. He staggers but keeps moving. 5 yards. 3. 1. Hands reach out to drag him over the wall. He collapses on the other side, blood soaking his uniform from multiple wounds. "Medic!" Tanner shouts, though no medic accompanies the small patrol. Lomell waves away the concern. "Just patch me up enough to move. We need to pull back and call in artillery on that position." While Tanner applies a field dressing to Lomell's leg wound, the sergeant turns his attention to the two French children, who huddle nearby, watching with wide, fearful eyes. "Tell them we'll take care of them," Lomell tells Private Frank South, who speaks passable French. "Their mother and grandfather are dead. Ask if there's anyone else in the house." South converses briefly with the children in halting French. They say their father is in the German army, conscripted from Alsace. Their mother and grandfather were the only family here. The news adds another layer of tragedy to the situation. These children are now orphans of war, their family divided and destroyed by forces beyond their control. "We'll take them back to the CP," Lomell decides. "The civil affairs people can figure out what to do with them." With their wounded leader supported between two men and the French children in tow, the patrol begins a careful withdrawal. They will return with artillery support to deal with the German position in the farmhouse. But for now, their mission has changed, from combat to rescue. As they make their way back toward the Ranger lines, the little French girl suddenly stops and tugs at Lomell's blood-stained jacket. When he looks down, she hands him something, a small carved wooden figure of a bird. A simple toy, perhaps her only possession. "Merci," she says softly. "Pour nous sauver." "Thank you for saving us." Lomell, who understands no French, nevertheless comprehends the gesture. He smiles through his pain and places the wooden bird carefully in his pocket. A small moment of humanity amid the larger horror of war. June 8, 1944. 0430. Field Hospital, 1 mile inland from Omaha Beach. The canvas tent is filled to capacity with wounded men, Americans from various units of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions, Rangers, engineers, even a few German prisoners receiving treatment under guard. Lieutenant Sidney Solomon, the 2nd Ranger Battalion's surgeon, has been operating continuously for nearly 20 hours. His surgical gown is stiff with dried blood. His eyes burn from fatigue. His hands, steady through countless procedures, have finally begun to tremble slightly from exhaustion. "You need rest, doctor," a nurse tells him as he finishes suturing a chest wound on a young infantryman. "You can't go on like this." Solomon shakes his head. "Too many still waiting," he replies, though his voice lacks conviction. He knows she's right. He's reaching the limits of human endurance. But the flow of wounded seems endless. As he moves to the next patient, a ranger with multiple shrapnel wounds, a hand falls on his shoulder. He turns to find Colonel Rudder standing behind him. "That's enough, Sidney," Rudder says gently but firmly. "You're relieved. Get some sleep." Solomon starts to protest, but Rudder cuts him off. "That's an order, Lieutenant. You're no good to these men if you collapse. Army surgeons have arrived to take over." Too exhausted to argue, Solomon nods and allows himself to be led to a small tent reserved for medical officers. He falls onto a cot fully clothed and is asleep within seconds. His dreams are chaotic. Blood and sand and the screams of wounded men blend together in a nightmarish collage. He wakes frequently, jerking upright on the cot, certain he's hearing calls for a medic. Each time he forces himself to lie back down, reminding himself that others have taken up the burden. At 10 o'clock, feeling somewhat restored by 5 hours of fitful sleep, Solomon emerges from the tent. The field hospital has expanded dramatically overnight. New tents have been erected. More medical personnel move purposefully between them. Ambulances arrive continuously, bringing fresh casualties from the expanding front lines. Solomon reports to the hospital's commanding officer, a major from the Army Medical Corps, and is immediately assigned to triage, sorting incoming wounded according to the severity of their injuries. It's grim work, requiring split-second decisions that determine who receives immediate treatment and who must wait. Throughout the day, Solomon encounters more Rangers among the wounded, men he knows personally, men whose families he's met during training in England, men who had scaled the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc or fought through the murderous fire on Omaha Beach. Private First Class James Devine, who had refused treatment for a shrapnel wound at Pointe du Hoc, arrives with a raging infection, his shoulder swollen and hot to the touch. Solomon administers penicillin, still a relatively new wonder drug, and hopes it will be enough to save the young ranger's arm, perhaps his life. Sergeant William Elrod Petty, shot through the lung while leading a patrol near Vierville, is conscious but struggling for breath when he arrives. Solomon inserts a chest tube to reinflate the collapsed lung, then watches anxiously as Petty's color improves. "You'll make it, Sergeant," he tells the veteran ranger. "But your war is over." By evening, Solomon has processed more than 100 casualties. The faces begin to blur together. Young men, most barely out of their teens, bearing wounds of every description. Bullet holes, shrapnel lacerations, blast injuries from mines and artillery, crushing trauma from collapsed bunkers and vehicle accidents. At 2100, as Solomon is about to be relieved for a few hours of sleep, a commotion at the entrance to the triage tent draws his attention. A jeep has arrived, carrying a single casualty, a ranger with multiple gunshot wounds. Solomon recognizes him immediately, Sergeant Leonard Lomell, the man who had found and disabled the German artillery battery on D-Day. "What happened?" Solomon asks the driver as he helps transfer Lomell to a stretcher. "Farmhouse full of Germans," the driver replies. "He ran out under fire to save some French kids after their mother was killed. Got hit 3 times. Lomell is conscious but pale from blood loss. "The children?" he asks as Solomon begins cutting away his blood-soaked uniform. "Safe," Solomon assures him. They're being cared for at the Civil Affairs section. Lomell nods weakly, then reaches into his pocket with a grimace of pain. He produces a small wooden carving, a bird, simple but lovingly crafted. From the little girl, he explains. Keep it for me, just in case. Solomon takes the carving, understanding the unspoken concern. Lomell's wounds are serious. A through-and-through bullet wound to the thigh that has missed the femoral artery by millimeters, a graze along his upper arm, and a more troubling wound to his lower abdomen. You'll keep it yourself, Solomon says with more confidence than he feels. These wounds look worse than they are. Lomell manages a weak smile. You're a terrible liar, Doc. As Solomon works to stabilize Lomell for surgery, he reflects on the nature of the men he serves with. Rangers are selected for physical toughness and mental resilience. They're trained to endure hardship and pain beyond what most soldiers can tolerate. But what truly sets them apart, he's come to realize, is not their ability to inflict violence, but their capacity for sacrifice. Lomell had risked, perhaps given, his life not for some strategic objective or military necessity, but for two French children he didn't know and would never see again. In the midst of history's largest invasion, with the fate of nations hanging in the balance, he had seen only the immediate human need before him. By 2200, Lomell is in surgery. The abdominal wound proves less serious than feared. The bullet passed through the abdominal wall without penetrating the peritoneum. Barring infection, he should recover. Solomon finally allows himself to be relieved, stumbling back to his cot for a few hours of desperately needed sleep. The wooden bird carving sits on a small table beside him, a reminder that even in war's darkest moments, humanity can still shine through. June 9, 1944. 08 o'clock, Regimental Headquarters, 116th Infantry, inland from Omaha Beach. Lieutenant Joe Dawson of Company G, 2nd Ranger Battalion, reports as ordered to Colonel Charles Canham, the regimental commander. Dawson's uniform is clean but worn, his face gaunt from days of combat and minimal sleep. Lieutenant Dawson reporting as ordered, sir, he says, saluting crisply despite his fatigue. Canham returns the salute. At ease, Lieutenant. Have a seat. He gestures to a chair beside his field desk, which is covered with maps and operational orders. I've been reading the after-action reports from Omaha, Canham continues once Dawson is seated. Your name keeps coming up. You and your Rangers were instrumental in breaking the stalemate on the beach. Dawson shifts uncomfortably at the praise. We just did our job, sir. The men of the 116th fought just as hard. Canham nods, acknowledging the point. That's why I've called you here. We're restructuring our forces for the push inland. Your battalion has taken heavy casualties, too many to function as an independent unit for the time being. The news isn't surprising to Dawson. Of the approximately 225 men who had comprised D, E, and F companies of the 2nd Ranger Battalion on D-Day, fewer than 90 remain combat effective. Many of those are walking wounded, men with minor injuries who have refused evacuation. I'm attaching your remaining Rangers to the 116th, Canham explains. You'll serve as our spearhead for the advance towards St. Lo. Your experience in close-quarters combat and small unit tactics is exactly what we need for this hedgerow fighting. Dawson considers the assignment. The bocage country of Normandy, with its ancient hedgerows creating natural defensive positions, has already proven to be ideal terrain for German defensive operations. Every field must be cleared separately, every hedgerow potentially concealing an enemy position. It's brutal, costly fighting that favors the defender. We'll do our best, sir, Dawson says simply. Canham studies the young officer for a moment. You look dead on your feet, Lieutenant. When did you last sleep? Dawson tries to remember. I got a few hours last night, sir. Before that, I'm not sure. Canham shakes his head. Get some rest today. Your Rangers won't move out until tomorrow morning. I need you sharp. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As Dawson rises to leave, Canham adds, one more thing, Lieutenant. Division is recommending you for the Distinguished Service Cross for your actions on D-Day. The paperwork is being processed. Dawson stiffens slightly. Sir, with respect, there were others who did far more than I did. Sergeant Geldon, Lieutenant Spaulding, Private Barrett, all being recognized appropriately, Canham assures him. But from what I've heard, you were the one who organized the first effective assault up that draw. Without that breakout, we might still be fighting on the beach. Dawson doesn't argue further, though the commendation sits uneasily with him. In his mind, he had simply done what anyone would do in the circumstances. Keep moving forward, keep fighting, because the alternative was unthinkable. Outside the headquarters tent, Dawson finds his first sergeant, James Fuller, waiting for him. "How'd it go, sir?" Fuller asks as they walk toward the Ranger bivouac area. "We're being attached to the 116th for the push to St. Lo," Dawson explains. "Moving out tomorrow morning." Fuller nods, processing the information. "The boys won't mind that. We've been fighting alongside the 116th since the beach. Good outfit." They walk in silence for a few moments before Fuller speaks again. "Word came down about Sergeant Lomell. He's being evacuated to England tonight. Doctors say he'll make it, but his war is over." The news brings mixed emotions for Dawson. Relief that Lomell will survive, sadness at losing one of his best NCOs, guilt at feeling even momentary relief that someone is leaving the front lines while the rest of them remain. "Anyone else leaving?" he asks. "Petty's already gone. That lung wound was worse than it looked, and they're sending Lieutenant Solomon back as well." "Solomon? Why? He wasn't wounded, was he?" Fuller shakes his head. "Exhaustion, they're calling it. Doc worked nearly 40 hours straight in the field hospital. Some colonel from the medical corps found him unconscious over an operating table. Ordered him evacuated before he kills himself or makes a mistake that kills someone else." Dawson absorbs this news with a frown. The battalion surgeon has been with them since training in England, a steady, calming presence amid the chaos of combat. His loss will be felt keenly. By the time they reach the Ranger bivouac, Dawson has made a decision. "Gather the men," he tells Fuller. "I want to talk to them before they rack out." 10 minutes later, the surviving Rangers of Companies D, E, and F are assembled. 78 men where there should be more than 200. Dawson looks at their faces, exhausted, dirty, some still bearing dried blood from wounds they've refused to have treated. But their eyes are clear and attentive. These men have been through hell together and have emerged as something more than just soldiers. They've become a brotherhood forged in fire. "Tomorrow we move out," Dawson tells them without preamble. "We're being attached to the 116th Infantry for the push towards St. Lo. It's going to be tough fighting through the hedgerows. The Germans are dug in and determined." He pauses, looking from face to face. "Some of our wounded are being evacuated tonight. Lomell, Petty, Doc Solomon. Others will follow. But most of us are still here, still fighting. And that's what we'll keep doing until this job is finished." The men nod, their expressions somber but resolute. "Get some rest," Dawson concludes. "Tomorrow comes early." As the men disperse to their foxholes and makeshift shelters, Sergeant Fuller remains behind with Dawson. "You should take your own advice, sir," he says quietly. "You look about ready to fall over." Dawson manages a tired smile. "I will, Frank. Soon." But instead of seeking his own shelter, Dawson makes his way to a small rise overlooking the beach. From here, he can see the massive logistical operation continuing below. Ships offloading supplies, trucks moving in convoy toward the front, new troops marching inland to join the battle. And beyond, the channel stretches to the horizon, its waters now calm and innocent-seeming, bearing no trace of the blood that had stained it red just 3 days earlier. Dawson stands there until sunset, alone with his thoughts and memories. Only when darkness falls does he finally seek his foxhole and the few hours of troubled sleep it offers. Tomorrow, as he'd told his men, comes early, and with it, more fighting, more dying, more horror in the hedgerows of Normandy. June 10, 1944, 0530, a farm field 2 miles south of Vierville-sur-Mer. The surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion, now attached to the 116th Infantry Regiment, advance cautiously through the bocage country of inland Normandy. The morning is misty, visibility limited to less than 100 yards. Lieutenant Joe Dawson leads the point element, 12 Rangers moving in a loose skirmish line, alert for any sign of German defenders. Behind them, a company from the 116th follows at 50 yards distance, ready to provide support if the Rangers encounter resistance. The battlefield has changed dramatically from the open killing ground of Omaha Beach. Here, the ancient hedgerows, walls of earth and vegetation up to 15 feet thick and 10 feet high, create a natural maze. Each field must be treated as a separate tactical problem. Each hedgerow potentially conceals German positions. "Hold up," Sergeant Frank Fuller whispers, raising a closed fist. The patrol freezes in place. Fuller points to the hedgerow ahead, a small gap, probably created by local farmers to move between fields, provides the only visible passage. It's an obvious choke point, exactly where the Germans would establish an ambush. Dawson studies the situation, then gestures to Private First Class Carlton Barrett, the diminutive ranger whose small size makes him ideal for reconnaissance. "Check it out, Barrett. Nice and easy." Barrett nods and begins crawling forward, using every fold in the ground for cover. At 5'4" and 125 pounds, he can move with remarkable stealth when necessary. He reaches the base of the hedgerow and begins working his way along it, searching for any sign of German presence. The other Rangers wait in tense silence, weapons ready. Dawson checks his watch, 0542. If they maintain their current pace, they should reach the outskirts of St. Lo by nightfall, assuming they don't encounter significant resistance. Barrett returns 10 minutes later, moving in a low crouch. "Gap's clear, sir," he reports to Dawson. "But there's something on the other side. Fresh tire tracks, maybe a vehicle moved through recently." Dawson considers this information. "Could be a civilian tractor," he says, though without much conviction. "Or a German patrol." Fuller shakes his head. "Civilians aren't moving around freely yet. Too dangerous with all the fighting." "Agreed. So we assume it's a German vehicle." Dawson studies the gap in the hedgerow again, weighing options. "We can't bypass it. The maps show this is the only passage for half a mile in either direction. And we can't wait. The 116th is counting on us to scout ahead." He makes his decision quickly. "We'll proceed, but with maximum caution. Barrett, you're on point again. Fuller and I will be 5 yards behind you. The rest of you, spread out and be ready for anything." The Rangers advance as ordered, moving through the gap one at a time, each man covering the next. Barrett goes first, then Dawson and Fuller, then the others at 5-second intervals. The field beyond is shrouded in mist, visibility even more limited than before. The ground is muddy from recent rain, clearly showing the tire tracks Barrett had spotted. A single vehicle, probably a motorcycle or small car, that had passed through within the last few hours. "Tracks head south," Barrett whispers, pointing to where they disappear into the mist. "Same direction we're going." Dawson nods and signals the patrol to continue. They move in silence, alert for any sound that might indicate German presence. They're halfway across the field when the attack comes, not from the front as expected, but from their left flank. A German MG-42 opens up from a concealed position in the hedgerow, its distinctive high cyclic rate earning it the nickname Hitler's buzzsaw among Allied troops. "Cover!" Dawson shouts as bullets tear through the mist around them. The Rangers dive for what little protection the open field offers. Shallow drainage ditches, slight depressions in the ground, a few scattered hay bales left from the previous season's harvest. Private James Ryan, caught in the open, takes a burst directly to his chest. He falls without a sound, dead before he hits the ground. The machine gun continues to sweep the field, pinning the Rangers in place. From somewhere beyond it, rifle fire joins in. A German infantry squad supporting the machine gun team. Dawson, sheltered behind a hay bale that provides minimal protection, assesses the situation. They're caught in a classic ambush, lured into the open field by the gap in the hedgerow, now pinned down by fire from positions they can barely see through the mist. "Fuller," he calls to his first sergeant, who has found cover in a drainage ditch a few yards away. "Can you see where that MG is?" Fuller raises his head slightly, scanning the hedgerow. A burst of fire forces him back down immediately. "Can't get a fix on it, sir. The mist's too thick." Dawson considers their options, which are few and all bad. They can't advance across open ground under that volume of fire. They can't retreat without exposing themselves even more. And they can't stay where they are indefinitely. We need suppressive fire, he decides. Barrett, Michaels, use your BARs to hit that hedgerow. Concentrate on the area where you think the MG is located. The rest of us will bound back to the gap. The two bar gunners open up, their automatic rifles providing a steady volume of fire that forces the German gunners to momentarily seek cover. In that brief respite, 3 Rangers make it back to the gap in the hedgerow. The German machine gun responds with renewed intensity, once again pinning down the remaining Rangers. The exchange of fire continues for several minutes, neither side able to gain advantage. The stalemate is broken in an unexpected way. A massive explosion erupts at the German position, far larger than any grenade could produce. The machine gun falls silent. Smoke billows into the misty air. "What the hell was that?" Fuller asks, peering cautiously over the edge of his ditch. Before Dawson can respond, the distinctive rumble of a tank engine grows louder. Through the mist, the outline of an American Sherman tank becomes visible, approaching from the direction of the previous field. "It's the 743rd, Dawson exclaims, recognizing the tank battalion attached to their regiment. The Sherman's commander stands in the turret hatch, waving to the Rangers. "You boys look like you could use some help," he calls. The tank advances to the hedgerow where the German position had been, its 75mm main gun still smoking from the recent shot. No further fire comes from the Germans. The direct hit appears to have eliminated the threat. With the tank providing cover, the Rangers quickly reorganize. Private Ryan's body is recovered, the only casualty they've sustained in the brief but intense firefight. The tank commander, a lieutenant named Michael Williams, confers with Dawson. "We were sent up to support your advance," he explains. "The 116th got word of German armor moving in this sector." "That explains the tracks we found," Dawson says. "Have you encountered any other resistance?" Williams shakes his head. "Nothing substantial. A few snipers, one anti-tank gun that didn't know what it was up against. But intelligence says there's a panzer unit operating somewhere in this area, probably a reconnaissance element from the 2nd Panzer Division. The news adds urgency to their mission. If German armor is indeed present, the Rangers and their infantry support are ill-equipped to deal with it. The Shermans of the 743rd Tank Battalion will be essential for the continued advance. We'll move together from now on," Dawson decides. "My Rangers will still take point, but no more than 100 yards ahead of your tanks. If we spot armor, we'll fall back and let you handle it." Williams agrees to the plan. "We've got 5 tanks total in this section. The rest of the battalion is supporting other elements of the 116th. With the combined force of Rangers, infantry, and tanks, the advance resumes, more cautiously now, with the knowledge that German armor may be encountered at any moment." The mist begins to lift as the morning progresses, revealing the full extent of the bocage landscape, a patchwork of small fields separated by the ancient hedgerows. It's perfect defensive terrain, allowing the Germans to fall back from position to position while inflicting maximum casualties on the advancing Americans. By midday, they've covered only a mile of ground, each field requiring careful reconnaissance and often a brief firefight to clear German rearguard elements. The pace is frustratingly slow, but there's no safe alternative in this environment. At 1300, as they approach yet another hedgerow, the distinctive sound of a German tank engine reaches them, the higher-pitched whine of the Maybach engine used in Panzer IVs and Panthers, clearly different from the deeper rumble of the American Shermans. "Tank!" Barrett calls from his forward position. "Panzer IV, about 200 yards beyond this hedgerow." The Americans take cover as Lieutenant Williams radios the information to the other tanks in his platoon. "We'll handle this," he tells Dawson. "Keep your men back." The Sherman advances to the hedgerow, using its bulk to push through rather than seeking a gap. Trees and earth give way before 60 tons of American steel. The tank's 75mm gun is already traversing, seeking a firing position. Before it can fire, however, a flash erupts from the German position. A high-velocity anti-tank round strikes the Sherman's front armor with a metallic clang that echoes across the field. The American tank shudders from the impact but continues forward. The round has bounced off its sloped frontal armor. The Sherman fires in response, its 75mm gun rocking the tank backwards slightly with the recoil. Through gaps in the hedgerow, the Rangers can see the shell impact near the German tank, sending dirt and debris skyward, but apparently missing the target. A second German round finds its mark, striking the Sherman's turret. This time, the American tank stops abruptly. Flames begin to lick around the turret hatch. The tank commander, Lieutenant Williams, emerges, his uniform smoldering. He drops to the ground and rolls to extinguish the flames, then crawls rapidly away from the stricken vehicle. Moments later, a catastrophic explosion tears through the Sherman as its ammunition stores detonate. The turret is blown completely off, landing 20 yards away. Black smoke billows upward, marking the tank's grave for miles around. The German Panzer, having dispatched its American counterpart, now turns its attention to the infantry. Machine gun fire from its coaxial MG-34 sweeps the hedgerow where the Rangers have taken cover. "Pull back," Dawson orders. "We can't fight armor without tank support." The Rangers begin a fighting withdrawal, moving from cover to cover while maintaining fire on the German position to discourage pursuit. Lieutenant Williams, despite burns to his face and hands, joins them in the retreat. "My other tanks are coming up," Williams tells Dawson as they reach a relatively safe position 2 fields back. "They'll hit that Panzer from the flank." Within minutes, the sound of tank fire erupts again, multiple Shermans engaging the German Panzer. The outcome remains uncertain, as Dawson leads his Rangers further back to link up with the main body of the 116th Infantry. The advance towards St. Lo has been temporarily halted, another example of how difficult and costly the fighting in Normandy's Bocage country will be. The Rangers have survived another engagement, but the war is far from over. June 12, 1944, 11 o'clock. A field hospital near Isigny-sur-Mer. Lieutenant Sidney Solomon, the 2nd Ranger Battalion surgeon, sits on the edge of his cot, still resistant to the orders sending him back to England. Despite his exhaustion, or perhaps because of it, he cannot shake the feeling that he's abandoning his men when they need him most. "You're not thinking clearly, Doctor," Major Howard Phillips, the hospital's commanding officer, tells him bluntly. "You've been awake for nearly 72 hours with only brief naps. You're a danger to your patients and yourself." Solomon knows the Major is right. His hands tremble constantly now. His vision blurs at unpredictable intervals. His thought processes, once rapid and precise, have become sluggish. But still, the sense of duty that drove him through those terrible hours on Omaha Beach and at Pointe du Hoc remains strong. "Just one more day," he argues. "Let me check on my Rangers before I go." Phillips shakes his head. "Your Rangers are 20 miles from here, Lieutenant, in active combat, and you're in no condition to go anywhere except to a real bed in England where you can get some actual sleep." The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of an orderly. "Sorry to disturb you, sir," he says to Phillips, "but there's a Ranger sergeant here asking for Lieutenant Solomon. Says it's important." Solomon looks up, suddenly alert. "Who is it?" "Sergeant Lomell, sir. He's scheduled for evacuation on the same hospital ship as you." Solomon rises immediately, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. "Where is he?" "Ward 3, sir. But he's not supposed to be up and moving around with those wounds." Solomon heads for Ward 3 without waiting for Phillips' permission or response. He finds Leonard Lomell sitting on the edge of a bed, his face pale from blood loss and pain, but his eyes clear and determined. "Doc," Lomell greets him with a wan smile. "Heard they're shipping us both back to England." Solomon nods, taking in Lomell's condition with a professional eye. The sergeant's wounds have been properly treated, the abdominal injury dressed, the leg wound splinted to immobilize it during transport. But he should still be lying down, conserving his strength. "You shouldn't be sitting up," Solomon admonishes gently. "Those stitches in your abdomen could tear." Lomell waves away the concern. "I'll lie down on the ship, but I needed to give you this first." He reaches into his pocket and produces the small, wooden bird carving that the French girl had given him. Found out the kids are being sent to a Red Cross facility near the hospital ship's landing point. Thought maybe you could return this to the little girl when you get there. Tell her I'm okay. Solomon takes the carving, touched by the request. Even now, with his own life in the balance, Lomell's thoughts are for others. A child he barely met, who might soon forget the American soldier who saved her. I'll make sure she gets it, Solomon promises. And I'll tell her you're going to be fine. Lomell nods, satisfied. Thanks, Doc. He pauses, then adds, any word from the front? How are our boys doing? Solomon shares what little he knows, that the Rangers are now attached to the 116th Infantry, advancing slowly through the difficult bocage country towards Saint-Lô, that casualties continue to mount as the Germans contest every hedgerow, every field, every farmhouse, that the original D-Day objectives, meant to be secured within 24 hours, remain unattained a week after the invasion. They'll make it, Lomell says with quiet confidence. Our boys are the best. If anyone can get through that mess, they can. Their conversation is interrupted by a nurse announcing that the ambulances are ready to transport them to the coastal station, where the hospital ship awaits. Two orderlies arrive with a stretcher for Lomell, who submits to being carried with obvious reluctance. As they're loaded into separate ambulances for the journey to the coast, Solomon realizes he's still holding the wooden bird carving. He studies it briefly, a simple object, lovingly crafted by hand, now invested with meaning far beyond its humble appearance. Like so many artifacts of war, it has become a symbol of both tragedy and hope. The loss of a mother, the survival of her children, the sacrifice of men like Lomell who risked everything for strangers. The ambulance jolts over damaged roads as it makes its way toward the coast. Through the small rear window, Solomon can see columns of troops and vehicles moving in the opposite direction. Reinforcements heading to the front. Fresh men who have yet to experience the horror that awaits them. By 1600, they reach the coastal station, a makeshift facility established on the beach where landing craft ferry the wounded out to the hospital ships anchored offshore. Hundreds of stretchers line the sand, a testament to the cost of the ongoing battle for Normandy. The hospital ship, HMS Leinster, a former Irish sea ferry converted for medical use, waits a quarter-mile offshore. Landing craft shuttle back and forth, carefully transferring the wounded from beach to ship. As Solomon and Lomell wait their turn, a commotion erupts nearby. A wounded soldier, a paratrooper from the 101st Airborne by his insignia, has become delirious, fighting against the orderlies attempting to load him into a landing craft. Without thinking, Solomon rushes to assist, his medical training overriding his own exhaustion. He helps restrain the thrashing man, speaking in soothing tones until the soldier calms. Only then does he realize he's still clutching the wooden bird carving in one hand. When he returns to Lomell's stretcher, the Ranger Sergeant is unconscious, either from pain, medication, or simple exhaustion. Solomon checks his pulse, steady if a bit weak, then sits beside him to wait for their turn to board. By 1800, they're finally aboard the HMS Leinster, settled in adjacent bunks in a ward filled with wounded Americans. The ship's engines rumble to life as it prepares to depart for England. Solomon, despite his exhaustion, remains awake as the ship gets underway. Through a nearby porthole, he watches the coast of Normandy recede. The beach is now transformed into a massive supply depot, the bluffs topped with anti-aircraft batteries, the sky filled with barrage balloons to deter low-level German air attacks. Somewhere beyond that visible landscape, the surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion continue their advance, fighting and dying in the hedgerows of Normandy. Solomon will not be with them. His war, like Lomell's, has taken a different turn. As darkness falls and the coast disappears from view, Solomon finally allows himself to lie down. The wooden bird carving rests on a small shelf beside his bunk, a promise to be kept, a reminder of connections formed amid chaos, a small piece of humanity preserved in the larger inhumanity of war. Sleep, when it comes, is deep and dreamless, the first true rest he's had since the invasion began. June 15, 1944, 0430. a foxhole 2 miles northeast of St. Lo. Lieutenant Joe Dawson wakes to the sound of artillery. German 88mm guns firing from positions near the city. The shells land with precise regularity, walking steadily closer to the American lines. "They've got us ranged," Sergeant Frank Fuller observes from the adjacent foxhole. Like Dawson, he's been awakened by the incoming fire. Dawson checks his watch, 30 minutes before their planned attack time. The Germans have either been tipped off by collaborators or have simply anticipated the American advance based on previous patterns. "Pass the word," Dawson tells Fuller. "We move now. No point waiting to get pounded by artillery." Fuller crawls from position to position, alerting the Rangers to the change in plans. The men rise from their foxholes with the quick efficiency of veterans, gathering equipment with minimal noise or light. By 0445, they're moving forward through the pre-dawn darkness, advancing toward the next hedgerow in their path. Behind them, German shells continue to fall on their now vacant positions. The surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion, now reduced to fewer than 50 effective fighters, serve as the spearhead for the 116th Infantry Regiment's advance. 9 days of continuous combat since D-Day have taken a devastating toll. But those who remain have developed an almost supernatural ability to sense danger and react accordingly. As they approach the hedgerow, Private First Class Carlton Barrett, still on point despite the constant danger of the position, raises a closed fist, the signal to halt. The Rangers freeze in place, weapons ready. Barrett points to the ground before them. In the faint pre-dawn light, Dawson can just make out what the sharp-eyed Ranger has spotted. Thin wires running along the base of the hedgerow. Tripwires, almost certainly connected to mines or booby traps. "Good catch, Barrett," Dawson whispers. "Mark a safe path if you can find one." Barrett nods and begins methodically checking the ground, using the tip of his bayonet to gently probe for additional wires or pressure plates that might trigger explosives. It's painstaking work, requiring absolute concentration. While Barrett works, Dawson confers with Fuller about their next move. "Once we're through this hedgerow, we'll be in sight of St. Lo. The Germans will have observation posts with clear lines of fire." Fuller nods grimly. "And probably more than just OPs. Intelligence says they've got at least a battalion of infantry dug in on these approaches, plus those 88s we've been hearing." "One problem at a time," Dawson says. "First we get past these mines." Barrett returns after 10 minutes of careful searching. "Found a gap about 20 yards to our right," he reports. "Looks like they didn't have enough mines to cover the whole hedgerow, but it's narrow, single file only." Dawson considers the information. A single file passage is far from ideal. It creates a choke point where his men would be vulnerable if discovered. But the alternative, attempting to clear the mines in darkness, is even riskier. "We'll take the gap," he decides. "Barrett, lead us through, then we'll spread out on the other side." The Rangers begin moving toward the identified gap, maintaining absolute silence. Even the clink of equipment has been minimized by careful padding and taping, a technique they've perfected over days of hedgerow fighting. Barrett leads them to the gap, a narrow animal trail through the ancient hedgerow, barely wide enough for a man to pass. He hesitates at the entrance, studying the ground one final time for any sign of traps. "Clear," he whispers, and begins moving through. One by one, the Rangers follow, each man alert for any change in the situation. Dawson is the 10th man through, with Fuller and 15 others still behind him. As Dawson emerges on the far side of the hedgerow, he immediately senses something wrong. The Rangers who preceded him have frozen in place rather than spreading out as planned. He quickly sees why. Directly ahead, no more than 50 yards away, is a German machine gun position. The MG-42 is set in a sandbagged emplacement, its barrel pointed directly at the gap in the hedgerow. 2 German soldiers man the position, but miraculously, both appear to be asleep, victims of the long, tedious hours of night watch. Dawson signals the men to hold position. Any movement might alert the Germans, but they can't stay here. The rest of the unit is still filing through the gap, and dawn is approaching rapidly. When the sun rises, their position will be completely exposed. With hand signals, Dawson communicates a plan to the Rangers nearest him. 2 men will circle to the right, 2 to the left, to flank the machine gun position. The others will provide covering fire if needed. All will move simultaneously on his signal. As the flanking teams get into position, the situation suddenly deteriorates. One of the German sentries stirs, perhaps alerted by some subliminal sound or simply waking at the end of his watch. He sits up, reaching for his rifle. Dawson gives the signal immediately. 3 short clicks on his cricket, a small metal noisemaker originally used by paratroopers on D-Day to identify friendly forces in darkness. The flanking teams move with practiced precision. Before the German sentry can fully react, they're on the position from both sides. The engagement is brief and silent, knives rather than guns, to avoid alerting other German positions that might be nearby. Within seconds, the threat is neutralized. The Rangers quickly dismantle the MG-42, distributing its ammunition among those carrying captured German weapons, and prepare to move forward again. But the brief action has cost precious time. The eastern sky is beginning to lighten, false dawn giving way to the real thing. Soon, they'll be visible to any German observation posts on the high ground ahead. "We need to reach that tree line before full light," Dawson tells Fuller, who has now come through the gap with the remaining Rangers. He points to a small copse of trees about 300 yards ahead, the only available cover in what is otherwise open ground. Fuller studies the terrain and the lightening sky. "Going to be close, sir." "We'll move in rushes," Dawson decides. 2 teams, leapfrogging forward, maximum speed. The Rangers divide into 2 groups of 25 men each. Dawson will lead the first team, Fuller the second. They'll alternate moving and providing cover, each rush carrying them 50 yards closer to the tree line. "First team, ready," Dawson says quietly. "Go." He leads the first rush, the Rangers moving in a low crouch across the open field. 50 yards, 70. They drop to prone positions in the tall grass and train their weapons on the terrain ahead, covering the second team's advance. "Second team, go," Fuller calls, and his group begins their rush. They're halfway to Dawson's position when disaster strikes. A flare arcs into the sky from somewhere to their right, a German observation post that has spotted the movement. The flare bathes the field in harsh white light, turning the advancing Rangers into clearly visible targets. Almost immediately, machine gun fire erupts from multiple positions ahead. German MG-42s, pre-sighted on the field, lay down interlocking fire zones that leave no safe path forward. "Down! Down!" Fuller shouts, and his men flatten themselves in the grass and depressions of the field. But they're caught in the open, with minimal cover and no concealment, now that the flare has revealed their position. From his more advanced position, Dawson can see the German fire coming from at least 3 separate emplacements. One in the tree line they had been headed for, and 2 others on the flanks. His men are pinned down, unable to advance or retreat without crossing those killing zones. And worse is coming. In the distance, he can hear the distinctive sound of German mortars being fired, the hollow thump of rounds leaving the tubes. In seconds, those rounds will begin falling on the exposed Americans. "Mortars!" he shouts in warning. "Spread out, don't bunch up." The Rangers respond instantly, creating as much distance between individuals as possible to minimize casualties from the expected barrage. But in doing so, they lose what little mutual support their tight formation had provided. The first mortar rounds land with deafening concussions, sending dirt and shrapnel in all directions. One falls directly in a cluster of 3 Rangers who hadn't separated quickly enough. When the smoke clears, none of the 3 are moving. More rounds follow, walking across the field with methodical precision. The German mortarmen are experienced, adjusting their fire based on observed impacts to maximize casualties. Dawson realizes they have only one option. "Fuller!" he shouts above the din. "Get your men back to the hedgerow. Go now, while they're still ranging the mortars." Fuller acknowledges with a wave and begins organizing his team's withdrawal. They'll have to cross the field they just traversed, but the alternative is annihilation where they lie. "First team will cover you," Dawson calls, and his Rangers open fire on the German positions, focusing on the machine gun nests to force the gunners to duck momentarily. Fuller's team begins moving back toward the hedgerow, using every fold in the ground for cover. Some crawl on their bellies, others use short rushes between mortar impacts. The German machine guns traverse to track them, but the suppressive fire from Dawson's team disrupts their aim. Most of Fuller's men reach the relative safety of the hedgerow, but Dawson's team, having revealed their positions to provide covering fire, now face the concentrated attention of all three German machine guns, plus the increasingly accurate mortar fire. "Our turn," Dawson tells the men nearest him. "Same drill, back to the hedgerow. Go when I give the signal." Before he can issue that order, however, a mortar round lands directly in their midst. The world explodes in noise and pain. Dawson feels himself lifted and thrown by the concussion, then nothing at all. When he regains consciousness, he's being dragged across the ground by two Rangers. His ears ring painfully, and he can feel blood running down the side of his face from a wound he can't see. But he's alive, unlike the three men who had been closest to the mortar impact, now just broken forms in the grass behind them. By some miracle, most of Dawson's team makes it back to the hedgerow. 16 men, out of the 25 who had started the advance. 9 left behind, some dead, others too badly wounded to move and now prisoners if they survive. Fuller helps Dawson to a sitting position against the base of the hedgerow. "That was close, sir," he says, his voice sounding distant through the ringing in Dawson's ears. "Thought we'd lost you when that mortar hit." Dawson tries to speak, finds his mouth too dry, swallows painfully. "How many?" he finally manages. 12 dead that I could confirm. 5 wounded who had to be left behind. The rest of us made it." Dawson absorbs this news grimly. Nearly half his remaining Rangers lost in a single failed advance. The worst casualties they've suffered since Omaha Beach. A medic appears, beginning to dress the shrapnel wound on Dawson's temple. "You're lucky, sir," he says as he works. "Half an inch to the right and you'd be dead." Luck. It always comes down to that in the end. Not skill, not training, not even courage, though all those matter. Just the random chance of where you happen to be standing when the shell lands or the bullet finds its mark. As the medic finishes bandaging his head, Dawson looks at the surviving Rangers gathered around him. 28 men where there had been 50 just an hour earlier. 28 out of the original 225 who had landed on D-Day. The casualties are unsustainable. Even the Rangers, selected for their exceptional abilities and trained to absorb losses that would cripple regular infantry units, cannot continue at this rate of attrition. "We'll try again tonight," Dawson says, his decision made. After dark, no more daylight advances against prepared positions. Fuller nods in agreement. "The main body of the 116th should be up by then. We'll have more firepower, maybe some tank support." Dawson knows it's the right tactical decision, but that knowledge does nothing to ease the burden of the men lost in today's failed attack. Men who had survived the hell of Omaha Beach and days of brutal hedgerow fighting, only to fall within sight of St. Lo. The Rangers settle into defensive positions, preparing for the inevitable German counterattack that will come now that their presence has been detected. The battle for Normandy continues, each day adding to the growing list of casualties on both sides. And St. Lo, their objective, remains tantalizingly close but still beyond reach. A symbol of the difficulties yet to come as the Allied forces fight their way deeper into occupied France. June 18, 1944. 0200, a wooded area 1 mile northeast of St. Lo. 3 days have passed since the failed daylight attack. Days filled with sporadic artillery fire, probing actions, and the slow buildup of American forces for a major assault on the city. Lieutenant Joe Dawson, his head wound now properly dressed and beginning to heal, studies the illuminated face of his compass. The Rangers are once again moving forward in darkness, but this time they're part of a much larger operation. A regimental-size attack involving the entire 116th Infantry, plus supporting armor and artillery. 5 minutes to the jump-off line, he whispers to Sergeant Fuller, who will relay the information to the 26 remaining Rangers. 3 days of relative inactivity have allowed some of the walking wounded to return to duty. slightly offsetting the losses from the previous action. They reach the designated position, a hedgerow marking the current front line, and take cover while waiting for the signal to advance. All along the line, other units of the 116th are similarly positioned, creating an attack front nearly a mile wide. At precisely 02:15, the prearranged signal comes. 3 green star shells fired from the American rear areas, arcing high over the battlefield before descending on parachutes, bathing the landscape in eerie emerald light. "Let's go," Dawson says, and the Rangers rise as one, moving forward through gaps cut in the hedgerow by combat engineers during the day's preparation. This time, there is no attempt at stealth. The artillery preparation, hundreds of shells fired from batteries miles to the rear, has alerted the Germans to the impending attack. Instead, the Americans rely on overwhelming force, with multiple units advancing simultaneously across a broad front, supported by tanks and mobile artillery. The Rangers, as usual, form the spearhead of their sector. They advance rapidly across the open ground where their previous attack had been halted, expecting at any moment to meet resistance from the German machine gun positions they know are there. But the artillery preparation has done its work. The first German position they encounter is a shattered ruin, its occupants either dead or forced to retreat by the devastating barrage. The second has been abandoned, its crew apparently falling back to secondary positions closer to the city. The Rangers maintain their advance, moving steadily forward in the darkness. Behind them, the main body of the 116th Infantry follows, with Sherman tanks from the 743rd Tank Battalion providing mobile firepower to deal with any strong points they encounter. By 03:30, they've covered nearly half a mile, terrain that had cost them dearly just days before. The German resistance, though present, is disorganized and ineffective, suggesting that the artillery barrage has disrupted their command and control systems. As they approach the outskirts of St. Lo, however, the situation changes. The first buildings, mostly farms and small workshops on the city's periphery, provide excellent defensive positions. German snipers and machine gun teams have established interlocking fields of fire that cover all approaches. "Hold here," Dawson orders as bullets begin to strike around them. The Rangers take cover in ditches and behind scattered debris, assessing the new threat. Through his binoculars, Dawson can see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different buildings. The Germans have transformed this outer ring of structures into a formidable defensive line. "We need the tanks," he tells Fuller. "This is exactly what they're for." Fuller relays the message to their radio operator, who contacts the tank platoon assigned to support their sector. Within minutes, the distinctive rumble of Sherman engines announces their arrival. The tank commander, a lieutenant named Harrison, confers briefly with Dawson about the German positions. "We'll take care of those buildings," he says confidently. "Just keep any Panzerfaust teams off our backs." The Shermans advance, their 75mm main guns targeting the buildings one by one. The explosions are deafening in the pre-dawn stillness, illuminating the battlefield in brief, bright flashes. German return fire is immediate and surprisingly effective. Anti-tank rounds, probably from concealed 88mm guns, streak toward the American tanks. One Sherman takes a direct hit to its turret, bursting into flames as its ammunition cooks off. The crew bails out, running frantically to escape the inferno that their vehicle has become. Despite this loss, the remaining tanks continue their advance, methodically reducing the German-held buildings to rubble. Under the cover of their fire, the Rangers move forward again, securing each position as the tanks clear it. By 0500, with dawn breaking over the battlefield, they've established a foothold in the outer ring of St. Lo. The city itself, or what remains of it after weeks of bombing and artillery fire, lies just ahead, a maze of rubble-choked streets and partially collapsed buildings that promises even more difficult fighting to come. Dawson establishes his command post in what had once been a small cafe, now just 3 walls and part of a roof. Maps are spread on a salvage table as he confers with Fuller and Lieutenant Harrison from the tank platoon. "Regimental HQ says we hold this line until the units on our flanks catch up," Dawson explains, indicating their position on the map. Then we all push into the city proper together. Harrison nods, studying the urban terrain ahead. It's going to be house to house, street by street. My tanks will have limited mobility in there. We'll clear a path for you when we can, Dawson assures him. But you're right, this is becoming infantry territory. As they continue planning, a runner arrives from regimental headquarters with updated orders. Dawson reads the message quickly, then looks up with an expression of disbelief. We're being pulled off the line, he announces. The entire Ranger element is to report to division headquarters at 1400. Fuller stares at him. Pulled off? Now? When we're finally making progress? Dawson shakes his head, equally confused. Orders say we're being, quote, reassigned to duties commensurate with our specialized training, whatever that means. The news spreads quickly among the Rangers, generating a mix of reactions. Some are relieved at the prospect of leaving the grinding advance that has cost them so dearly. Others feel they're abandoning the job half-finished, especially with St. Lo, their objective for days, finally within reach. By midday, replacement troops from the 115th Infantry have arrived to take over their positions. The Rangers gather their equipment and begin the trek back to the rear areas where transportation awaits to take them to division headquarters. As they pass through the territory they fought so hard to secure over the past 12 days, Dawson reflects on the cost of their advance. Of the original 225 men who had landed on D-Day, only 26 remain in active service. The others are either dead, wounded severely enough to require evacuation, missing, or suffering from combat exhaustion, what will later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. They reached the designated rendezvous point at 1345, ahead of schedule despite the difficult terrain. Military police direct them to a collection of trucks waiting on what had once been a country lane, but is now a major supply route, churned to mud by constant traffic. At 1400 precisely, a staff car arrives. A colonel from division headquarters steps out, consulting a clipboard before addressing the assembled Rangers. "Lieutenant Dawson," he calls. "Here, sir," Dawson responds, stepping forward. "Your men performed admirably in the advance from Omaha Beach to St. Lo," the colonel states formally. "Division recognizes your contributions and sacrifices." The Rangers remain silent, waiting for the real purpose of this meeting. Effective immediately, the surviving elements of the 2nd Ranger Battalion are being withdrawn from frontline service. The colonel continues. "You will be transported to Cherbourg for rest and reconstitution. Replacements are being trained in England and will join you there within the week." The news brings visible relief to many faces. Cherbourg, recently captured by American forces, represents safety, a place where they can sleep without fear of artillery, eat hot meals, and begin to process all they've experienced since D-Day. "What happens after we reconstitute, sir?" Dawson asks. The colonel hesitates, then answers with careful neutrality. "That decision hasn't been made yet, Lieutenant. For now, your orders are simply to get your men to Cherbourg and await further instructions." As the Rangers board the trucks for the journey to Cherbourg, Dawson finds himself seated next to Sergeant Fuller. The veteran NCO studies his young lieutenant's expression with knowing eyes. "You're wondering if we did enough," Fuller says. "It's not a question." Dawson nods, the guilt he's been carrying suddenly exposed. "We didn't take St. Lo. After all this, we didn't finish the job." Fuller's weathered face shows no judgment, only understanding. "Our job was never about one town or one beach, sir. It was about opening the door. And we did that. At Omaha, at Pointe du Hoc, in every damn hedgerow between there and here." He gestures to the men around them, hollow-eyed, exhausted, some dozing against the swaying sides of the truck, others staring silently at nothing. "These boys opened the door with their blood. Others will go through it. That's how it works." Dawson considers this perspective. There's truth in it, though it does little to ease the sense of an unfinished task. But perhaps that's the nature of this war. No single unit completes the mission alone. Each contributes its part to the larger effort. As the trucks rumble toward Cherbourg, Dawson allows himself to truly rest for the first time since June 6th. The constant vigilance, the life-or-death decisions, the responsibility for men's lives, all temporarily lifted from his shoulders. He doesn't know what awaits them after reconstitution. Perhaps they'll return to the front in a different sector. Perhaps they'll be held in reserve for specialized missions. For now, it's enough that they've survived. The remnant of a proud unit that had faced the worst the Germans could throw at them and still accomplished their mission. The Rangers have led the way, as their motto declares. Others will follow. June 25, 1944. 10. A hospital in southern England. Sergeant Leonard Lomell sits in a wheelchair on the hospital's sun porch, enjoying the warm summer morning. His wounds are healing well, the abdominal injury showing no sign of infection, the leg wound painful but clean and beginning to close. A nurse approaches, pushing another wheelchair. "You have a visitor, Sergeant," she announces cheerfully. Lomell looks up to see Lieutenant Sidney Salomon being wheeled toward him. The battalion surgeon looks markedly better than when Lomell had last seen him. The hollow-eyed exhaustion replaced by merely normal fatigue, some color returned to his face. "Doc," Lomell greets him with genuine pleasure. "They finally let you out of bed?" Solomon smiles as the nurse positions his wheelchair beside Lomell's. "Just for short periods. Apparently extreme exhaustion isn't something you recover from overnight." "Who would have thought?" Lomell responds with gentle sarcasm. "Only working 72 hours straight under combat conditions. Soft living, if you ask me." The shared joke, dark humor that only those who have experienced combat can truly appreciate, creates a moment of connection between the two men. Though one is a combat soldier and the other a medical officer, they have shared experiences that few others can comprehend. "I have something for you," Solomon says after a moment. He reaches into his bathrobe pocket and produces the small wooden bird carving that the French girl had given Lomell. "I tried to return it as you asked, but the children had already been moved to another facility. No one knew where." Lomell takes the carving, turning it over in his hands thoughtfully. "Probably for the best," he says finally. "Let her forget the American soldier and the day her mother died. Children are resilient. She'll make a new life somewhere." Solomon studies his patient and friend, struck by the mixture of hardness and compassion that defines men like Lomell. Capable of incredible violence when necessary, yet willing to risk everything to save a child. It's a paradox he's observed repeatedly among the Rangers, a capacity for both destruction and profound humanity. "Any word from the front?" Lomell asks, changing the subject. Salomon shares what little news has reached the hospital, that St. Lo remains contested, with American forces slowly pushing into the city against fanatical German resistance. That the surviving Rangers of the 2nd Battalion have been withdrawn to Cherbourg for rest and reconstitution. That the breakout from the Normandy beachhead, originally planned for the immediate aftermath of D-Day, has been repeatedly delayed by the unexpected difficulty of the bocage fighting. "So we're still bottled up in Normandy," Lomell summarizes, his tactical mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. "That's not good. Gives the Germans time to bring up reinforcements, establish defensive lines." "The build-up on our side continues too," Salomon points out. "More men and equipment landing daily. It's become a race to see who can concentrate force faster." Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a hospital orderly with a telegram for Lomell. The sergeant opens it with some difficulty, his wounded arm still lacking full dexterity, and reads the brief message. "Well, I'll be damned," he says, looking up at Solomon with a mixture of surprise and pride. "They're putting me in for the Distinguished Service Cross, for finding and disabling those guns at Pointe du Hoc." Solomon nods, unsurprised. "Well deserved. You saved countless lives that day." Lomell shrugs, uncomfortable with the recognition. "Kuhn was with me, and it was Colonel Rudder who led us up those cliffs in the first place. Without him, none of us would have been there to find those guns." "I'm sure they're being recognized as well," Solomon assures him. "The Army may be slow and bureaucratic, but it usually gets around to acknowledging exceptional service eventually." They sit in companionable silence for a while, each lost in his own thoughts. The sun warms their faces. The gentle English breeze carries the scent of flowers from the hospital gardens, and for a brief moment, the war seems very far away. But it isn't, of course. It's just across the channel, grinding on with relentless fury. And soon enough, both men will return to it in their different capacities. Solomon as a surgeon, Lomell perhaps as an instructor for new rangers once his wounds have healed sufficiently. The wooden bird carving rests on Lomell's lap, a tangible reminder of both the horror and the humanity they have witnessed. Neither man mentions it again, but both find their eyes drawn to it periodically. A small artifact from a vast conflict, carrying meanings beyond its simple form. July 4, 1944. 11 o'clock. A replacement depot near Cherbourg. Lieutenant Joe Dawson stands before what remains of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, the original 26 survivors, now supplemented by approximately 200 replacements fresh from training in England. The new men are easy to identify, their uniforms still relatively clean, their faces lacking the hollow-eyed, thousand-yard stare that marks the veterans. They regard the original Rangers with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, aware of the unit's reputation, but unsure if they can live up to its standards. "Gentlemen," Dawson begins, his voice carrying across the assembled formation. "Today is Independence Day back home. Fitting that we spend it preparing to continue the fight for freedom here in Europe." The men listen attentively, the replacements standing slightly straighter at this reminder of their purpose. "Most of you are new to this battalion," Dawson continues. "You've heard stories about D-Day, about Pointe du Hoc and Omaha Beach. Some of those stories are probably even true. This draws a brief chuckle from the veterans, who know how quickly battlefield accounts become exaggerated in the telling. But the past is the past. What matters now is what we do going forward. The 2nd Rangers have been reconstituted for a reason. High Command believes there's still important work for us to do." He pauses, looking across the formation. "That work begins tomorrow. We're moving back to the front, not to St. Lo, but to a different sector. The details will be shared with squad and platoon leaders after this formation." The news brings no visible reaction from the veterans. They've expected nothing less. But among the replacements, Dawson notes subtle signs of anxiety, shifting feet, nervous glances exchanged. It's natural enough. Despite their training, they haven't yet faced the reality of combat. "To the men who've been with this battalion since D-Day," Dawson says, addressing the veterans directly now, "I want to express my profound respect and gratitude. What you accomplished in those first days of the invasion will be remembered as long as men speak of courage and determination." The veterans remain impassive, uncomfortable with praise for what they see as simply doing their duty. But Dawson feels it important to acknowledge their sacrifices, especially in front of the replacements, who will now serve alongside them. "To the new men," he continues, shifting his focus, "you have big shoes to fill. But remember this, every veteran standing in this formation was once exactly where you are now, untested, uncertain. They became Rangers by facing fear and moving forward anyway. You will do the same." The formation concludes with administrative announcements from the company first sergeants. Details about equipment issue, transportation to the front, mail call procedures. The mundane machinery of military operations, continuing despite the life and death stakes of their mission. As the men disperse to their assigned duties, Sergeant Fuller approaches Dawson with a folded paper in hand. "Just received this from Division, sir. Thought you'd want to see it right away." Dawson opens the document, official orders detailing their new assignment. He reads quickly, his expression growing more serious with each paragraph. "They're sending us to clear the Forêt de Cerisy," he says when he finishes. "German stronghold that's been holding up the advance west of Isigny." Fuller nods grimly. "Dense forest, perfect defensive terrain. Regular infantry has tried twice to clear it and been thrown back with heavy casualties both times. So they're sending in Rangers," Dawson concludes. "Classic special operations mission, high risk, high reward." The forest in question, approximately 10 square miles of dense woodland, has become a thorn in the side of the American advance. German forces, estimated at battalion strength, have established interlocking defensive positions among the trees. Artillery can't effectively target them due to the overhead canopy. Tanks can't maneuver in the close terrain. It's an infantry fight, and so far, the regular infantry units have proven unequal to the task. We move out at 0600 tomorrow, Dawson tells Fuller. Have the platoon leaders ready for a briefing at 1600 today. We'll need to start planning immediately. Fuller acknowledges the order and departs to notify the platoon leaders, leaving Dawson alone with his thoughts. The Foray de Cerisy mission will be the first test of the reconstituted 2nd Rangers, a baptism of fire for the replacements, and a new challenge for the veterans. Success will require all the skills and determination that have made the Rangers legendary. Failure will mean not only the loss of men, but potentially a significant delay in the overall Allied advance. Dawson studies the map attached to the orders, memorizing the terrain features, noting potential approach routes and rally points. The responsibility weighs heavily, not just for the men under his command, but for the broader strategic situation. Every day the Allies remain confined to the Normandy Peninsula gives the Germans more time to strengthen their defenses throughout France. The liberation of Europe, begun on the blood-soaked beaches of Normandy, continues, and once again, the Rangers will lead the way. July 5, 1944, 22:30. The edge of the Foray de Cerisy. Under cover of darkness, the Rangers of the 2nd Battalion approach their objective, a dense forest that has become a German stronghold. Lieutenant Dawson, leading the point element, signals a halt as they reach the tree line. The forest looms before them, a wall of darkness concealing unknown dangers. Intelligence reports suggest the Germans have established multiple defensive lines within the woods, with interlocking fields of fire and pre-registered artillery targets covering all likely approach routes. Breacher teams forward, Dawson orders quietly. 4 teams of Rangers move up, each carrying Bangalore torpedoes, tube-shaped explosive devices designed to clear paths through barbed wire. Intelligence has indicated the Germans have established wire obstacles at the forest edge, and the Rangers are prepared to deal with them. Working in darkness with practiced efficiency, the breacher teams locate the first wire obstacle. 3 rows of concertina wire, each approximately 3 feet high, creating a barrier nearly 10 feet deep. Behind it, barely visible in the moonlight, wooden stakes indicate a minefield, another layer of defense to impede any attack. Sergeant Fuller crawls forward to join Dawson at the observation position. Just like the report said, he whispers. Wire, mines, probably machine gun positions covering the obvious entry points. Dawson nods, studying the defenses through his binoculars. Despite the darkness, he can make out disturbed earth and unnaturally regular patterns in the undergrowth, signs of defensive preparation by experienced troops. We'll breach in 3 locations, he decides. Charlie Company will create a diversion at the main forest road to the south. Abel and Baker will make the actual penetrations here and 300 yards north. Fuller relays the orders through runners, maintaining radio silence to avoid alerting the Germans to their presence. The Rangers take position, the veterans ensuring the replacements understand their roles in the complex operation about to unfold. At precisely 2300, the operation begins. Charlie Company, 200 yards to the south, initiates the diversion, a mock attack at the most obvious entry point to the forest. Flares, tracer rounds, and the distinctive chatter of Browning automatic rifles create the impression of a major assault. The German response is immediate and overwhelming. Machine guns open fire from concealed positions. Mortars begin dropping shells with pre-sighted accuracy. Flares illuminate the area, turning night to artificial day. But the real attack comes elsewhere. At Dawson's position, breacher teams move forward under cover of the diversion. Working with swift precision, they place Bangalore torpedoes beneath the wire obstacles and retreat to safe positions. "Fire in the hole!" a sergeant calls, and the first Bangalore detonates with a sharp crack, slicing through the concertina wire like scissors through paper. Mine clearance teams follow immediately, using bayonets and combat knives to carefully probe for the buried anti-personnel mines beyond the wire. It's painstaking, dangerous work, requiring absolute concentration, even amid the noise and confusion of battle. "Path clear, sir," a corporal reports to Dawson after several tense minutes. "About 2 feet wide, marked with white engineer tape." Dawson gives the order to advance, and the Rangers begin moving into the forest in single file, each man careful to stay within the narrow, cleared path. One misstep could mean death or devastating injury from a mine. The noise of Charlie Company's diversion continues to draw German fire, allowing Dawson's force to penetrate nearly 100 yards into the forest before encountering resistance. The first contact comes suddenly. A German patrol, perhaps investigating the explosion from the Bangalore torpedo, stumbles upon the advancing Rangers. The engagement is brief and brutal. In the confined spaces between trees, the fighting devolves to close quarters, bayonets, trench knives, and pistols rather than rifles. 5 Germans fall without raising an alarm. 2 Rangers are wounded but able to continue. By midnight, Dawson's force has penetrated deep into the forest, bypassing the first line of German defenses thanks to the successful diversion. But the most difficult part of the mission lies ahead, locating and eliminating the main German command post, believed to be situated near the center of the forest. The Rangers move with the stealth that has become their trademark, using hand signals rather than verbal communication, testing each step before committing their weight to avoid dry twigs that might snap and reveal their presence. At 0:30, they reach a small clearing and halt to reorient. According to their maps, they should be approximately 500 yards from the suspected location of the German headquarters. But the forest is disorienting, especially in darkness, and Dawson wants to ensure they're on the correct path before proceeding. As the Ranger scouts check their bearings, disaster strikes. A German sentry, hidden among the trees at the clearing's edge, spots movement and challenges in a harsh whisper. "Halt! Where da? Who goes there?" Private First Class Barrett, the closest Ranger to the sentry, reacts with the speed born of training and combat experience. His knife flashes in the darkness, striking before the German can raise his rifle or shout an alarm. The threat is neutralized, but the brief commotion has alerted another sentry. A rifle shot cracks through the night, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating trees and underbrush. A Ranger falls, hit in the shoulder. Within seconds, the element of surprise is lost. German machine guns open up from prepared positions, sweeping the clearing with interlocking fire. Flares rise above the forest canopy, casting harsh white light that creates confusing patterns of light and shadow among the trees. "Fall back to the tree line," Dawson orders, recognizing the clearing has become a killing zone. "Covering fire from 2nd Squad." The Rangers execute the maneuver with practiced precision, even the replacements responding to the crisis with disciplined action rather than panic. Those designated as covering fire lay down a steady barrage, forcing the German gunners to seek cover momentarily, while their comrades retreat to the relative safety of the dense trees. Once regrouped at the tree line, Dawson quickly assesses the situation. Their position is compromised, but their mission remains vital to the broader offensive. They must adapt and continue. "We'll split into 3 teams," he tells his platoon leaders. "Fuller will take 1st Platoon and continue toward the objective from the east. Lieutenant Ross, you'll take 2nd Platoon and approach from the west. I'll lead 3rd Platoon straight in once your diversions have drawn their attention." The Rangers disperse as ordered, moving through the forest in small groups that are difficult to track or engage effectively. The German defenders, designed to repel a conventional frontal assault, find themselves facing an enemy that seems to be everywhere and nowhere, striking from unexpected directions, then melting back into the darkness of the forest. Fuller's team is the first to make contact with the main German position, a collection of log bunkers and trenches surrounding a central command structure. The Germans have chosen their position well, establishing fields of fire that cover all likely approaches, but they haven't prepared for the Rangers' unconventional tactics. Instead of a frontal assault, Fuller's men infiltrate the defensive perimeter in 2s and 3s, using the Germans' own trenches as covered approaches. By the time the defenders realize what's happening, Rangers are already among them, creating chaos and confusion. From the west, Ross's platoon launches their attack, drawing German attention and fire. The defenders, now facing threats from multiple directions, begin to lose cohesion. Unit integrity breaks down as individual positions are overrun or isolated. Dawson, monitoring the situation through brief radio communications, determines the moment has come for the main assault. His platoon, held in reserve until now, advances directly toward the German command bunker, a substantial structure of logs and earth that serves as the nerve center of the forest defenses. The fighting intensifies as the Rangers close in on their objective. German resistance, initially disorganized by the multi-directional assault, stiffens as they realize their headquarters is the target. A desperate counterattack begins to form, threatening to cut off Dawson's platoon from the other Ranger elements. In this critical moment, the difference between the veteran Rangers and the replacements becomes apparent. The veterans respond to the developing threat instinctively, adjusting their positions and fire without explicit orders. The replacements, though brave and well-trained, hesitate momentarily, looking for guidance. Sergeant Frank South, one of the original D-Day veterans, takes charge of a group of replacements whose squad leader has fallen. "Follow me!" he shouts above the din of battle, leading them to a position where they can block the German counterattack. South's initiative proves decisive. His impromptu defensive line halts the German attempt to flank Dawson's main assault force, allowing the attack on the command bunker to proceed. By 03:15, after nearly 3 hours of intense fighting, the Rangers have achieved their objective. The German command post is in American hands, its defenders killed, wounded, or captured. Without central coordination, the remaining German positions in the forest become isolated pockets rather than a coherent defensive system. As dawn breaks over the Forêt de Cerisy, Dawson surveys the battlefield from the captured command bunker. The cost has been high: 15 Rangers killed, 27 wounded, some severely. But the mission has been accomplished. The German stronghold that had blocked the American advance for days has been neutralized. Throughout the morning, regular infantry units of the 29th Infantry Division arrived to secure the gains the Rangers have made. By midday, the entire forest is in American hands, opening a vital route for the continued Allied advance across Normandy. For Dawson and his men, there is little time to rest or reflect. New orders arrive before sunset. Another mission, another objective requiring the Rangers' unique capabilities. The war continues, and the Rangers will continue to lead the way. July 25, 1944, 1400 Och, a field hospital near St. Lo. 20 days have passed since the Rangers cleared the Forêt de Cerisy. 20 days of continuous combat as the Allied forces finally broke out of the Normandy Peninsula and began the liberation of France in earnest. Lieutenant Joe Dawson lies on a hospital cot, his left leg elevated and heavily bandaged. 3 days earlier, during an operation near Perrières, a German mortar round had exploded close enough to pepper his lower body with shrapnel. None of the wounds is life-threatening, but the cumulative damage has temporarily removed him from combat. A medical orderly approaches his bedside. "Visitor for you, Lieutenant." Dawson looks up to see Brigadier General Norman Cota, the assistant division commander who had rallied men on Omaha Beach and coined the phrase, "Rangers lead the way." The general's presence in a field hospital, visiting a mere lieutenant, is unexpected and somewhat unsettling. "Sir," Dawson says, attempting to sit straighter despite his injuries, "I wasn't expecting." Cota waves away the formality. "At ease, Lieutenant. This isn't an official visit." He pulls a folding chair to Dawson's bedside and sits. "I wanted to see how you were doing, and to tell you personally about some changes coming for the Rangers." Dawson listens as Cota explains the situation. The 2nd and 5th Ranger Battalions, having suffered enormous casualties since D-Day, are being withdrawn from the front lines for extended rest and reconstitution. More significantly, their role is changing, from frontline combat units to training cadre for specialized assault techniques. "The skills you and your men developed in the hedgerow fighting are invaluable," Cota explains. "We need you to teach others, rather than continuing to expend Ranger lives at the current rate." Dawson absorbs this news with mixed emotions. Part of him is relieved. The constant combat of the past 7 weeks has taken a physical and psychological toll, even beyond his current injuries. But another part feels a sense of being sidelined, removed from the direct fight while others carry on. "When does this take effect, sir?" he asks. "Immediately," Coda replies. Your battalion has already been relieved at the front. The men are being transported to England for the time being. Once you're recovered, you'll join them there. The conversation continues for a few more minutes. Details of the new assignment, commendations being processed for actions during the breakout from Normandy, personal inquiries about Dawson's health and recovery prospects. Then Coda rises, preparing to leave. One last thing, Lieutenant, he says, reaching into his pocket. This came through channels yesterday. I thought you might want to see it sooner rather than later. He hands Dawson a folded paper and departs with a brief nod. Dawson unfolds the document. Official orders promoting him to the rank of captain, effective immediately. The promotion isn't unexpected, given his role since D-Day, but the timing seems significant, coinciding as it does with the Rangers' withdrawal from frontline service. As he processes this new development, another visitor approaches his bed, Sergeant Fuller, his face sporting a fresh scar along the jaw, but otherwise appearing remarkably intact after weeks of continuous combat. Captain Dawson now, is it? Fuller says with a slight smile, having apparently passed General Coda on his way in and deduced the nature of the visit. Congratulations, sir. Thanks, Frank, Dawson replies, still studying the promotion orders. Did you know about the battalion being pulled off the line? Fuller nods, settling into the chair Coda had vacated. Word came down yesterday. Most of the boys are already on their way to Cherbourg to catch transports to England. How'd they take it? Fuller considers the question before answering. Mixed, like you'd expect. The veterans are mostly relieved, though they won't admit it openly. 50 days of continuous combat is enough to wear down anyone. The replacements, the ones who survived their baptism of fire, some of them feel like they're just getting started, that they're missing out on the big push now that we've broken out of Normandy. Dawson understands both perspectives. The veterans have given more than could reasonably be asked of any soldiers. The newer men, having survived their initial combat experiences, have developed the confidence that comes with proven capability, but haven't yet accumulated the bone-deep exhaustion of weeks under fire. And you? Dawson asks. How do you feel about becoming a training cadre? Fuller shrugs. I go where they send me, sir. Always have. But if you're asking my opinion, he pauses, collecting his thoughts. I think it's the right call. What's left of the original Ranger force, the men who trained together in England, who landed on D-Day. We're a resource the Army can't afford to lose completely. Better to preserve what's left of us. Use our experience to improve the capabilities of the regular infantry. The pragmatic assessment aligns with Dawson's own thoughts. The Rangers have paid a terrible price since June 6th. Of the original 225 men who had landed on Omaha Beach and at Pointe du Hoc, fewer than 40 remain in active service. The rest are dead, severely wounded, or suffering from combat exhaustion so profound they can no longer function effectively. Their conversation is interrupted by a nurse announcing the arrival of mail, the first delivery to reach them in over a week. Fuller collects letters for both himself and Dawson, then takes his leave, allowing his commanding officer privacy to read his correspondence. Alone with his thoughts and letters from home, Dawson reflects on the journey that has brought him to this hospital bed. From the blood-soaked shore of Omaha Beach to the hedgerows of Normandy, from the foray de Cerisy to the breakout battles near Perrières, 7 weeks that feel like a lifetime. He thinks of the men lost along the way, names and faces that will remain with him long after the details of battles and objectives have faded from memory. Ryan and Barrett, Collins and Morris, Eichner and Sullivan. Some he had known since training in England, others only briefly before death claimed them. All part of the brotherhood forged in the crucible of combat. As evening falls over the field hospital, Dawson finally opens his letters, connecting, however briefly, with the world beyond the war. News from home, trivial in its normalcy, yet precious for exactly that reason. A reminder that somewhere, life continues without the constant presence of death and destruction. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, recovery, a new assignment, the responsibility of training others to survive what he and his Rangers have endured. But for tonight, he allows himself to rest, secure in the knowledge that he has done all that was asked of him and more. The Rangers have led the way, as their motto declares. Others will follow the path they've opened, carrying the fight deeper into occupied Europe. And someday, perhaps, the sacrifices made on Omaha Beach and in the hedgerows of Normandy will be understood as necessary steps toward a world at peace. August 15, 1944. 10 o'clock. A training ground in southern England. Captain Joe Dawson, his leg wounds healed sufficiently to allow limited duty, watches as veterans of the 2nd Ranger Battalion demonstrate hedgerow fighting techniques to officers and NCOs from regular infantry units. The training area has been configured to simulate the bocage country of Normandy. Artificial hedgerows constructed from earth and vegetation, complete with the dense root systems that made them such effective defensive positions. The goal is to transmit the hard-won knowledge of the Rangers to the broader infantry force still fighting in France. Sergeant Fuller leads the demonstration, explaining the techniques developed during those brutal weeks of combat. The Germans typically position their machine guns to fire along the hedgerow rather than perpendicular to it. That gives them enfilading fire across your entire front if you try a conventional approach. The infantry officers take notes as Fuller continues. We found the most effective method is to breach the hedgerow at multiple points simultaneously, using Bangalore torpedoes or demolition charges. Then, instead of all forces pouring through a single gap, we send small teams through each breach, converging on the German positions from multiple angles. The demonstration proceeds, with Rangers playing both American and German roles to illustrate the tactics. The Germans set up their defense exactly as they had encountered during the actual fighting. Machine guns positioned for maximum coverage, mortars pre-sighted on likely approach routes, snipers concealed in trees or atop the hedgerows themselves. The American force then executes the Ranger solution: multiple breaches, simultaneous assaults from different directions, aggressive closing to distances where German automatic weapons lose their advantage. Dawson observes the training with mixed emotions, pride in the professionalism of his men, who execute the demonstration flawlessly despite their wounds and exhaustion. Satisfaction that their hard-earned knowledge will save lives in the ongoing campaign, but also a sense of disconnection from the real war, which continues without them on the battlefields of France. After the demonstration concludes, Dawson meets with the infantry officers to answer questions and provide additional insights. Most are eager to learn, recognizing the value of techniques developed through bitter experience. A few seem skeptical, perhaps resistant to the implication that their standard tactics need modification. The key thing to remember, Dawson tells them, addressing the skepticism directly, is that these methods evolved under fire, through trial and error, at a cost measured in men's lives. They're not theoretical. They're not from a manual. They're what worked when everything else failed. This blunt assessment silences the doubters, at least temporarily. The reality of combat has a way of cutting through professional pride and doctrinal rigidity. As the infantry officers depart, Dawson remains at the training area with Fuller and a few other veteran Rangers. They sit on ammunition crates, sharing cigarettes and quiet conversation, the easy camaraderie of men who have faced death together. Word from the front is they've broken out completely, Fuller says, passing a canteen. Patton's Third Army is driving east like a bat out of hell. Paris might be liberated within weeks. Dawson nods, having heard the same reports. The breakout from Normandy, begun just as the Rangers were being withdrawn, has accelerated beyond all expectations. German forces, their defensive lines shattered, are in full retreat across northern France. Good news, Dawson acknowledges, though I suspect the Germans will make a stand at the Siegfried Line if not sooner. The conversation turns to speculation about their own future. The training mission, while important, is clearly temporary. What happens when it's completed? Will the Ranger battalions be reconstituted and return to combat, or will they remain in a support role for the duration of the war? No one has definitive answers. The Rangers exist in a kind of limbo, neither fully engaged in the war nor entirely removed from it. They continue to train, to pass on their knowledge, to prepare for whatever mission might come next. But the sense of immediate purpose that had driven them since D-Day has been replaced by uncertainty. Later that afternoon, Dawson reports to battalion headquarters for a scheduled meeting with Lieutenant Colonel James Rudder, the commander who had led the Rangers at Pointe du Hoc and who continues to lead the combined 2nd and 5th Ranger battalions despite his own wounds from that day. Rudder's office is sparse: a desk, a few chairs, maps on the walls showing the current front lines in France. The colonel himself looks much as he did on D-Day, perhaps a bit thinner, with a few more lines around his eyes, but still projecting the quiet competence that had earned him the absolute trust of his men. "Sit down, Joe," Rudder invites, gesturing to a chair. "How's the leg?" "Much better, sir," Dawson replies. "Medical says I'll have full function eventually, though there might be some permanent stiffness in cold weather." Rudder nods, understanding the implications. Like most Rangers, Dawson minimizes his injuries, focusing on recovery rather than limitations. "I've been in communication with SHAEF about our future role," Rudder says, getting directly to business. SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, is the overall command structure for Allied operations in Europe. "And?" Dawson prompts when Rudder pauses. "It's complicated. The success of the breakout has changed strategic calculations. There's serious discussion about ending the war by Christmas if we can maintain momentum. Under those circumstances, committing specialized units like the Rangers to new operations might not align with the broader strategy." The news isn't entirely surprising, but it still carries a sting. The Rangers, having played such a crucial role in the invasion, might be sidelined for the final push into Germany. On the other hand, Rudder continues, there's recognition that units with our capabilities might be essential if the Germans establish strong defensive positions along the Rhine or elsewhere. We're being held in strategic reserve, essentially, available if needed, but not committed prematurely. Dawson processes this information. It makes sense from a strategic perspective, but it's cold comfort to men trained for action, who have already sacrificed so much, and who feel a natural desire to see the mission through to its conclusion. "What should I tell the men, sir?" Dawson asks finally. Rudder considers the question carefully before answering. "Tell them to continue training as if our next combat mission begins tomorrow, because it might. Tell them that what they're doing now, passing on their knowledge to the regular infantry, is saving lives and contributing to the campaign just as surely as if they were on the front lines. And tell them I'm proud of every damn one of them, regardless of what comes next." The meeting concludes shortly afterward. Dawson returns to the training ground, where the Rangers are cleaning equipment and preparing for the next day's demonstrations. He shares Rudder's message, emphasizing the continued importance of their current role while acknowledging the uncertainty of their future deployments. The men receive the information with the stoicism characteristic of veterans. They've learned to focus on the immediate task, to control what they can control, and to accept the rest with equanimity. If they feel disappointment at the prospect of missing the war's conclusion, they keep it largely to themselves. As evening falls, Dawson finds himself alone on the artificial hedgerow, looking eastward toward France and the advancing front lines. Though separated by the English Channel, he feels connected to the continuing battle, not just through the men he trained who are still fighting, but through a deeper sense of participation in a conflict that has defined his life and the lives of all who served with him. The Rangers have done their part. They scaled the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc, fought through the murderous fire on Omaha Beach, secured the vital exits that allowed the beachhead to expand, battled through the hedgerows of Normandy, and cleared the way for the breakout that now promises victory. If others complete the final chapter, so be it. The contribution of the Rangers has been written indelibly into the history of the war, not in triumphant headlines or official commendations, but in the blood soaked into the sands of Omaha Beach and the soil of countless Norman fields. They have, as their motto declares, led the way. June 6, 1984, 10 o'clock. Pointe du Hoc, Normandy, France. 40 years have passed since the Rangers scaled these cliffs under enemy fire. The battlefield has been preserved as a memorial, the shell-pocked landscape largely unchanged, the German bunkers still standing, though softened by time and weather, the sheer cliff face still imposing, despite the addition of a commemorative stairway for visitors. Among those visitors today are several elderly men who need no guided tour, no explanatory plaques, to understand the significance of this place. They are the survivors of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, men who, on June 6, 1944, accomplished what many considered impossible. Joe Dawson, now in his 60s, his hair gray, his face weathered, stands at the cliff edge looking down at the narrow strip of rocky beach below. The distance seems even greater than he remembers, perhaps because he's now viewing it from the defender's perspective, rather than as a young man focused solely on the mission of climbing upward. Beside him stands Leonard Lomell, the sergeant who had located and disabled the German artillery battery that threatened the landing beaches. Though time has bent his once straight back and slowed his movements, Lomell's eyes remain sharp, taking in the familiar terrain with the tactical assessment that became second nature during the war. "Hard to believe we actually made it up these cliffs," Lomell says, shaking his head slightly in retrospect. "If I hadn't done it myself, I'm not sure I'd believe it was possible." Dawson nods in agreement. "There are times I've wondered if it really happened the way I remember it. Then I look at these," he gestures to the faded scars on his hands, legacy of the desperate climb up the cliff face, "and I know it did." They move away from the edge, walking carefully across the uneven ground toward a group of their former comrades gathered near the remains of a German observation bunker. Among them is Frank Fuller, Dawson's first sergeant throughout the Normandy campaign, now retired after a full career in the Army. The reunion is both joyful and somber. Happiness at seeing old friends mixed with grief for those who never returned and those who have died in the decades since. Of the 225 Rangers who assaulted Pointe du Hoc, fewer than 30 remain alive to attend this 40th anniversary commemoration. Their conversation flows easily, jumping between memories of the war and updates on children, grandchildren, retirement activities. These men, once defined entirely by their identity as Rangers, have lived full lives since 1944, becoming businessmen, teachers, farmers, civil servants. Yet the bond formed during those critical days in Normandy remains unbroken, a connection transcending time and distance. At 11:30, they gather for the official ceremony, a multinational commemoration attended by dignitaries from the United States, Great Britain, France, and even Germany. Speeches are made, wreaths laid, prayers offered for the fallen of all nations. The Rangers listen politely to the politicians and generals, but their true commemoration happens later, after the officials have departed. They walk the battlefield together, each location triggering memories and stories. This is where Lieutenant Eichner established the first radio contact with the fleet. "Sergeant Petty led us up that draw after we found it wasn't mined. Lomell and Kuhn found the guns over there, about a mile inland. For a brief time, the years fall away. In their minds, they are young men again, exhausted, frightened, determined, doing what had to be done because failure was unthinkable. As evening approaches, they gather one final time at the monument erected to commemorate their achievement. The simple granite marker bears the Ranger insignia and a brief inscription describing the events of June 6, 1944. Below it, a bronze plaque lists the names of those who fell that day and in the subsequent fighting across Normandy. Dawson steps forward, placing a weathered hand on the cool stone. "For those who didn't come home," he says quietly. The others nod, each lost in personal memories of friends long gone. As the sun begins to set over the English Channel, casting long shadows across the battlefield where they once fought for their lives and the future of Europe, the elderly Rangers prepare to depart. Most will never return to Pointe du Hoc, travel becoming increasingly difficult with age, their numbers diminishing with each passing year. But they leave secure in the knowledge that what they accomplished here will not be forgotten. The cliff they scaled, the guns they disabled, the defensive perimeter they established and held against overwhelming odds, all are now part of military legend and historical record. Before boarding the bus that will take them back to their hotel, Lomell pauses for one last look at the battlefield. "You know," he says to Dawson. For years after the war, I had this recurring dream. I'm back at the bottom of that cliff, looking up. The Germans are firing down at us. The ropes keep breaking. And I can never quite reach the top. Dawson nods in understanding. I've had similar dreams. But we did reach the top, Lomell continues. We made it, and what we did here mattered. It mattered, Dawson agrees. And in that simple affirmation lies the ultimate meaning of their service. Not glory or recognition, but the knowledge that when history required ordinary men to accomplish the extraordinary, they answered the call. The sun touches the horizon, illuminating Pointe du Hoc in golden light one final time before darkness falls. Like the men who fought here, the battlefield itself is passing into history, its details softened by time, its significance understood differently by each new generation. But the essential truth remains, carved into stone and memory alike. On June 6, 1944, the Rangers led the way. Thank you for listening. If you are also proud of the bravery of our soldiers, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new historical stories.